The wilderness stretched endlessly beneath a steel-gray sky. Autumn had painted the forest in hues of amber and crimson, the trees standing like silent sentinels against the approaching winter. From his vantage point atop the granite outcropping, Thorn Blackcrest surveyed his domain with eyes that missed nothing. At 42, the Alpha King carried his power with the easy confidence of a man who had earned every ounce of his authority through blood and sacrifice. 20 years of rule had etched lines at the corners of his golden eyes. His broad shoulders remained unbowed by the weight of the crown, though the responsibility of 7 united territories had turned strands of his raven hair silver at the temples. The wind carried the scent of deer moving through the valley below. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, eager for the hunt, but Thorn held it in check with practiced discipline. The stag appeared at the edge of the clearing, magnificent with a 12-point rack that proclaimed his dominance over the herd. A worthy adversary. Thorn's muscles tensed, ready to shift, when a familiar scent reached him. He did not turn as Roland approached, recognizing the unique combination of pine, leather, and the faint metallic tang that never quite left the old warrior since the battle that had claimed his right leg. "You know," Roland said, his voice gruff with age and a lifetime of command, "most kings hunt with an entourage, guards, nobles vying for favor, servants to carry the kill." Thorn's mouth curved into a rare smile. "Most kings haven't earned the right to be alone with their thoughts." Roland grunted, leaning heavily on his gnarled oak staff as he joined Thorn at the edge. At 70, the former general remained one of the few people who dared speak to the Alpha King without careful consideration of every word. "The stag will wait for another day," Roland observed as the majestic creature disappeared back into the forest. "The council grows restless with your absence." Thorn's expression hardened. "The council has survived without me for 3 days. They can manage a few more hours. They're discussing marriage alliances again." The growl that rumbled from Thorn's chest was entirely wolf. 20 years ago, he had been a young general who united 7 warring territories through strategic brilliance and uncompromising strength. Now, politics required different weapons, ones he wielded with less enthusiasm. "Lord Victor brought his daughter," Roland continued, watching Thorn carefully. "Lady Elise, 4th this month. I have no interest in political marriages." The words came out sharper than intended. Roland was silent for a long moment, his weathered face solemn in the autumn light. "You felt it again last night, didn't you?" Thorn turned away, jaw tight. There was no hiding the truth from Roland, who had raised him after his father's death. The dreams had returned with increasing frequency. A faceless woman with eyes the color of spring leaves, the scent of wildflowers and rain, the inexplicable pull that woke him drenched in sweat, his wolf clawing to be free. "The old prophecy speaks of a king who fails to find his true mate," Roland said softly. "It warns that his kingdom will crumble from within." "Superstition," Thorn dismissed, though they both knew he didn't believe that. "Your father thought the same until he met your mother." Roland's voice gentled with memory. One look, and the great warrior king was brought to his knees by a healer's daughter with more courage than sense. The wind shifted, carrying with it the scents of the valley below. Thorn inhaled deeply, allowing his wolf senses to catalog each one: pine, earth, the distant smoke from village fires, home, yet somehow incomplete. "I leave for Willowvale tomorrow," Thorn announced, the decision crystallizing in that moment. "It's been 5 years since the last pledge ceremony." Roland's eyebrows rose in surprise. The villages expect the royal emissaries, not the king himself. Perhaps it's time to remind them their king is more than a distant figure on a throne. Thorn's gaze swept over the vast territory that was his responsibility. The Blackcrest line has always drawn strength from its connection to the land and its people. What he didn't say was that something pulled him eastward, had been pulling him for months, a restlessness that neither hunting nor the demands of rule could satisfy. His wolf knew something he didn't, and after a lifetime of trusting those instincts, Thorn wasn't about to ignore them now. Roland studied him with knowing eyes. "I'll make the arrangements. A small guard, nothing ostentatious. We can reach Willowvale in 3 days if we push." Thorn nodded, already turning his thoughts to the journey ahead. The villages along the eastern border had known peace for so long they might have forgotten the price paid for it. 20 years ago, those forests had run red with the blood of his soldiers as they pushed back Lord Victor Ravenclaw's forces. Victor had eventually sworn fealty, but Thorn never trusted the ambition that burned behind the man's carefully constructed facade. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Thorn allowed himself one moment of vulnerability that only Roland would ever witness. "What if she doesn't exist, old friend? What if my mate is merely a dream, a product of a king's lonely nights?" Roland placed a gnarled hand on Thorn's shoulder, the gesture carrying the weight of their shared history. "Every wolf has a mate, my king. Some are simply harder to find than others." The journey to Willowvale took them through villages that grew progressively smaller and more rustic as they traveled east. Children stared wide-eyed at the royal procession, while elders bowed deeply, surprise evident in their weathered faces. A king traveling to them, rather than summoning them to his castle, was unprecedented in living memory. Thorn observed everything with a critical eye. The prosperity of his reign was evident in the well-maintained roads, the healthy livestock, and the absence of the desperate hunger that had marked his childhood during the territorial wars. Yet there was room for improvement. Schools needed more resources. Bridges required repairs before the spring floods. On the 3rd day, they crested the final hill that overlooked Willowvale. The village nestled in a natural depression where 3 streams converged, surrounded by ancient oak and maple trees that had given the settlement its original name in the old tongue, Sanctuary of Leaves. Smoke rose from stone chimneys, and the central square bustled with activity as villagers prepared for the spring pledge ceremony. "It's smaller than I remembered," Thorn remarked as they began their descent. Roland chuckled. "The last time you were here, you were leading an army against Victor's southern flank. One tends to remember battlefields as larger than they are." The village headman, a portly beta named Thaddeus, nearly fainted when royal guards appeared at the village entrance, announcing the king's arrival. Word spread like wildfire through the small community, and by the time Thorn dismounted in the square, every available surface held a curious onlooker. "Your Majesty," Thaddeus stuttered, dropping to one knee. "Had we known of your visit, we would have prepared a welcome worthy of—" "Rise," Thorn commanded, uncomfortable with the display. "I come to observe the pledge ceremony, not disrupt your traditions." "Damn." While Roland handled the logistics of their stay, Thorn walked through the village, guards maintaining a respectful distance. He noted the condition of homes, the quality of goods in the small market, the faces of his subjects. Most displayed appropriate deference, though he preferred the honest curiosity of the children who stared openly at his imposing figure. Near the village herb garden, his attention was caught by a young woman with ash-brown hair gathered in a simple braid. She knelt among the plants, fingers moving with practiced precision as she harvested what appeared to be healing herbs. Unlike the others who stopped to gawk at their king, she continued her work, seemingly oblivious to the commotion. "Who is that?" Thorn asked a nearby elder, nodding toward the garden. The old woman's expression soured. "That would be Sage Moonvale, Your Majesty, our healer's daughter." Something in her tone made Thorn's wolf stir with interest. "You say that as though it's a condition rather than an occupation." The elder shifted uncomfortably. "The Moonvale girl is different. No wolf manifested at her coming of age. Some say she's cursed, soulless." Thorn's jaw tightened at the superstition. "And yet, she works the healing garden. Her mother taught her before passing 5 winters ago. The girl has a way with plants, I'll grant her that." The elder lowered her voice. "But a wolf without a wolf is no wolf at all." Thorn dismissed the woman with a nod, his gaze returning to the solitary figure. Sage had risen now, gathering her harvest into a rough-woven basket. She moved with a quiet grace that spoke of someone accustomed to making herself invisible. As though sensing his attention, she looked up, and for one breathless moment, green eyes met gold across the distance. The world stopped. Every sound faded to silence. Every scent disappeared except for one. Wildflowers and rain, exactly as in his dreams. Thorn's wolf surged forward with such force that he nearly shifted where he stood, claws breaking the skin of his clenched fists as he fought for control. The ground beneath his feet trembled slightly, responding to the power suddenly radiating from him. Sage's eyes widened. The basket slipped from her fingers, dried herbs scattering across the ground. Her face paled to the color of moonlight, and Thorn found himself moving toward her without conscious thought, drawn by an invisible force that defied explanation. Before he could reach her, a young woman appeared at Sage's side, placing a protective hand on her arm. Her resemblance to Sage marked her as kin, though her features were sharper, her posture more confrontational. "Fiona," Roland murmured, appearing at Thorn's side with uncanny timing. "Sage's younger sister, 18 summers, recently manifested. A strong beta, by all accounts." Thorn barely heard him. His entire being remained focused on Sage, who now backed away, confusion and fear evident in her expression. The wolf inside him howled in protest at her retreat. "Your Majesty?" Roland's voice finally penetrated the fog that had descended over Thorn's senses. "The headman awaits your pleasure regarding tonight's ceremony." With monumental effort, Thorn tore his gaze from Sage. "Yes," he managed, voice rougher than usual. "Of course." As they walked away, Roland kept his observations to himself until they reached the privacy of the headman's house, which had been hastily prepared for the king's use. "I've seen that look only once before," the old warrior said quietly, closing the door behind them. "When your father first laid eyes on your mother." Thorn moved to the window, watching as Fiona helped Sage gather her scattered herbs. "She has no wolf." "So they say." Roland's tone held skepticism. "But I've never seen your wolf respond to anyone like that." Thorn pressed his forehead against the cool glass, struggling to regain his equilibrium. "What do you know of the Moonvale family?" Roland stroked his gray beard thoughtfully. "The mother was highly respected before her passing, saved many lives during the border conflicts. The father was one of yours, actually. Fell in the Battle of Twin Rivers." "One of mine?" Thorn turned sharply. "Eric Moonvale. Carried your standard in the Northern Campaign. Died covering the retreat when Victor's forces ambushed the supply lines." Memory stirred. A loyal soldier with quiet determination and unusual amber eyes. "I remember him. He spoke of a daughter once. 2 daughters, though the younger was just a babe then." Roland settled his aging frame into a chair. "There were always rumors about the Moonvale line. Old blood, they said. Different." Outside, villagers were gathering in the square, erecting a ceremonial arch woven with spring flowers. The pledge ceremony would begin at sunset, when each of the 5 neighboring villages would renew their oaths of fealty to the crown, a tradition that dated back to the founding of the kingdom, long before Thorn had united the warring territories. "Have her brought to me," Thorn said suddenly. Roland raised an eyebrow. "The Moonvale girl?" Discreetly. Thorn's expression brooked no argument. "I would speak with her before the ceremony." As Roland departed to fulfill his request, Thorn paced the small confines of the headman's dwelling. His wolf remained agitated, closer to the surface than it had been in years. The pull toward Sage was undeniable, primal in its intensity. Yet she had no wolf, or so everyone believed. The contradiction defied everything he knew about mate bonds. The light was fading when Roland returned alone. "She refused," he reported, unable to keep the surprise from his voice. Politely, but firmly. "She refused a royal summons?" Thorn's voice was dangerously quiet. "She said she had preparations to complete for the ceremony and would be honored to speak with you afterward, should you still wish it." Roland's lips twitched. The sister was less diplomatic, suggested royal interest was rarely a blessing for common women. Instead of the anger Roland clearly expected, Thorn felt his respect for both women increase. Few had the courage to deny him anything, let alone a direct request. If Sage truly was what his wolf believed her to be, such strength would be essential for what lay ahead. "Then I shall await the ceremony," Thorn said, surprising himself with his patience. The square had been transformed by the time they emerged. Torches illuminated a space cleared for dancing, while tables groaned under the weight of the village's humble but hearty offerings. Musicians played traditional melodies that stirred memories of Thorn's youth, before the weight of the crown had changed everything. The formal pledges were made as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the western mountains. 5 village elders knelt before Thorn, renewing oaths that bound their communities to the crown. He listened with appropriate solemnity, though his attention repeatedly strayed to the edges of the gathering, searching for one face among hundreds. He found her at last, half hidden in shadow. Sage had changed from her working clothes into a simple dress the color of spring leaves, exactly matching her eyes. Her ash-brown hair had been partially braided with wildflowers, though she seemed uncomfortable with the attention the arrangement might bring. Beside her, Fiona stood like a sentinel, eyes never leaving the king who had shown such interest in her sister. As the ceremonial mead was passed and music resumed, Thorn made his way through the crowd. Conversations hushed as he passed, villagers bowing respectfully, but he acknowledged them only peripherally. His focus remained fixed on his target, who tensed visibly as he approached. "Lady Moonvale," he greeted her formally, though the title was honorary at best for a healer's daughter. Sage curtsied, her movements graceful despite her obvious nervousness. "Your Majesty honors me with his attention." Up close, her scent was even more intoxicating. Thorn's wolf clawed at his control, demanding recognition, claiming completion. He forced it down with iron will. "I knew your father," he said, surprising himself with the direction of his thoughts. Eric Moonvale was a man of uncommon courage. Sage's eyes widened slightly. "You remember him?" "He saved many lives during the Northern Campaign, including my own, though he never knew it." Thorn found himself wanting to give her this connection to a father she had likely barely known. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly, genuine gratitude in her voice. "I was 7 when he left for war. My memories are fragmented." Fiona shifted closer, her protective stance unmistakable. "Our father died for the crown. Our mother spent the rest of her life healing those broken by war. The Moonvale family has given enough to the kingdom, Your Majesty." "Fiona!" Sage hissed, mortified by her sister's directness. But Thorn was not offended. "Your sister speaks her mind, a rare quality in my presence, and one I find refreshing." His gaze returned to Sage. "Would you walk with me?" Before she could respond, a commotion near the ceremonial arch drew everyone's attention. Lord Victor Ravenclaw had arrived with his entourage, his timing calculated for maximum dramatic effect as always. At 55, the Southern Lord remained an imposing figure, his silver-streaked dark hair and aristocratic features a testament to his bloodline. Beside him rode his son, Magnus, every inch his father's son with the same calculating eyes and arrogant bearing. "Your Majesty," Victor called out, his voice carrying across the square as he dismounted. "What an unexpected pleasure to find you among our rustic neighbors." Thorn's expression revealed nothing of his irritation at the interruption. "Lord Ravenclaw, I didn't expect your presence at a village ceremony." Victor smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "When word reached me that the king himself was honoring Willowvale with his presence, how could I not pay my respects?" His gaze slid to Sage, and something in his expression made Thorn's hackles rise. Particularly when such unique treasures can be found in unlikely places. Before Thorn could respond, Roland appeared at his side, his presence a deliberate buffer between the king and the Southern Lord. "The headman has prepared a place of honor for you at the high table, Lord Ravenclaw." As Victor was led away, Thorn turned back to find Sage visibly unsettled. "You know him," he observed, not a question. "Lord Ravenclaw has shown interest in our village's healing traditions," she answered carefully. "He has visited several times over the years." Something in her tone suggested there was more to the story. Thorn made a mental note to have Roland investigate further. "My offer stands. Would you walk with me?" Sage hesitated, glancing at her sister. Some unspoken communication passed between them before she nodded. "A short walk, Your Majesty." They moved away from the celebration toward the ancient oak that marked the village center. Torchlight cast their shadows long across the ground, and the spring night carried a chill that promised frost by morning. Thorn noticed Sage shiver slightly and fought the urge to wrap her in his cloak. "You are not what I expected to find in Willowvale," he said, after a moment of silence. Sage kept her eyes on the path. "I'm not sure how to respond to that, Your Majesty. Honesty would suffice." She glanced up at him then, a flash of spirit in her green eyes. "Then honestly, I'm not sure what the Alpha King could possibly find interesting about a village healer with no wolf." The directness of her response pleased him. "Is that how you see yourself, defined by what you lack rather than what you possess?" "It's how everyone sees me," she corrected, no self-pity in her voice, only pragmatism. "The girl without a wolf, the soulless one." Anger flashed through Thorn at the cruel nickname. "And yet you remain here." "This is my home. My sister needs me." Sage's chin lifted slightly. "And despite what some believe, I have value. People still come to me when they're injured or ill." They reached the oak, its massive branches creating a canopy that muted the sounds of the celebration behind them. In the relative privacy, Thorn studied her more openly. There was a quiet strength in her that reminded him of still water, seemingly peaceful on the surface, but with unknown depths beneath. "Your blood is not cursed, Sage Moonvale," he said abruptly. "It is a gift that has been forgotten." Her head snapped up, eyes widening. "What do you mean?" Before he could answer, a chorus of shouts erupted from the village square. Thorn tensed, instantly alert to potential threats. Through the trees, they could see people gathering around something, or someone. "Fiona," Sage whispered, already moving back toward the commotion. Thorn followed, his longer stride easily matching her hurried pace. They emerged from the tree line to find Magnus Blackclaw standing over Fiona, who knelt on the ground clutching her cheek. A ring of onlookers watched in silent horror as the noble's son berated the young woman. "You should learn your place, village girl," Magnus was saying, his voice slurred from too much mead. "When a noble offers a dance, the appropriate response is gratitude, not refusal." Sage pushed through the crowd, dropping to her sister's side. "What happened? Are you hurt?" Fiona's eyes blazed with fury despite the red mark blooming on her cheek. "This drunken fool thought I should be honored by his attention." I disagreed. Magnus sneered down at them. "The soulless one and her feral sister. How touching." His gaze shifted to Sage, contempt giving way to something darker. "Perhaps you'd be more appreciative of noble interest, especially given your condition." The temperature seemed to drop as Thorn stepped into the circle, his presence commanding immediate silence. The playful celebrations of moments before vanished as primal instinct warned everyone present that the Alpha King's wolf was dangerously close to the surface. "You've laid hands on a woman under my protection," Thorn said, his voice deceptively soft. Magnus paled as he realized his mistake. "Your Majesty, I didn't—" "Lord Victor," Thorn called, not taking his eyes from the younger man. "Control your son before I decide his behavior reflects on your house." Victor materialized from the crowd, his expression carefully composed. "Magnus, apologize to the young lady immediately." Thorn watched the Southern Lord closely, noting the calculation behind his apparent contrition. Victor was too intelligent to allow his son to create such a scene without purpose. The question was, what did he hope to gain? Magnus offered a stiff apology that fooled no one, then allowed himself to be led away by his father. As the crowd dispersed, Thorn turned his attention to the sisters. "Are you injured?" he asked Fiona, who still knelt on the ground. "Only my pride," she answered, allowing Sage to help her to her feet. "Though I appreciate your Majesty's intervention." Thorn nodded, then fixed his gaze on Sage. "There are matters we must discuss. Tomorrow, when the celebrations are done." It wasn't a request this time, but a royal command. Sage held his gaze for a long moment before inclining her head in acceptance. "As you wish, Your Majesty." As Thorn watched them walk away, Roland appeared at his shoulder. An interesting coincidence, Lord Victor arriving just as you showed interest in the Moonvale girl. There are no coincidences where Victor Ravenclaw is concerned, Thorn replied, his eyes never leaving Sage's retreating form. Find out what he knows about her. The music resumed, though the mood had shifted. Thorn found himself besieged by village elders eager to curry favor, noble daughters presented for his approval, and dignitaries seeking private audiences. He endured it all with practiced patience, though his thoughts remained with the green-eyed woman who had so unexpectedly changed everything. When the moon reached its zenith, Thorn finally retreated to the headman's house. Roland followed, carrying a leather-bound journal that Thorn recognized from his personal archives. "You were right," the old warrior said, placing the book on the table. "The Moonvale line appears in the ancient records. Her grandfather served as royal advisor to your father before the wars." Thorn opened the journal, eyes scanning the faded script. "And her mother's lineage?" "That's where it gets interesting." Roland tapped a genealogy chart meticulously drawn on yellowed parchment. Helena Moonvale was born Helena Silverleaf, the last of a bloodline thought extinct after the Great Purge 3 centuries ago. The name triggered recognition deep in Thorn's memory, knowledge passed down through generations of Black Crest rulers. The Silver Omegas. Precisely. Roland's weathered face was solemn in the lamplight. If the girl inherited that blood... Thorn closed the book, pieces falling into place with disturbing clarity. She has no wolf because her wolf is waiting. Silver Omegas don't manifest until they meet their true mates. The implications were staggering. If Sage was indeed a Silver Omega, and if the pull Thorn felt was the true mate bond, then the kingdom stood on the precipice of a power shift not seen in centuries. The union of an Alpha King and a Silver Omega was the stuff of legends and warnings. "If Victor suspects what she is," Thorn said quietly, "she's in grave danger." Roland nodded grimly. "The Southern Lords have always feared the power of a united monarchy. A Silver Omega Queen would make you virtually unstoppable." Outside, the celebrations continued, villagers blissfully unaware of the ancient forces stirring in their midst. Thorn moved to the window, searching the dancing figures for a glimpse of ash-brown hair and green eyes. His wolf remained restless, sensing that everything was about to change. "Make preparations," he ordered. "We leave for the castle tomorrow, with the Moonvale sisters." "And if they refuse?" Roland asked, already knowing the answer. Thorn turned, his eyes glowing with the gold of his wolf. "They won't have a choice, not if they want to survive what's coming." As if in answer to his declaration, the wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of approaching change. Spring had arrived in Willowvale, bringing with it new life, new possibilities, and dangers that had slumbered for generations. In a small cottage at the village edge, Sage Moonvale opened her mother's journal, fingers tracing words written in a language she shouldn't understand, but somehow did. Ancient knowledge calling to blood that had waited patiently for its moment to awaken. She looked out at the moon hanging full and bright over the forest, and felt something stir within her. Not yet a wolf, but the promise of one. Tomorrow would change everything. Dawn broke over the forest with the reluctant grace of winter yielding to spring. Sage Moonvale stood at her cottage window, watching golden light spill across the village of Willowvale. Her fingers absently traced the spines of ancient books spread across her table, each one a piece of her mother's legacy. Sleep had eluded her entirely after the festival, her mind too full of golden eyes and impossible revelations. "Your blood is not cursed. It is a gift that has been forgotten." The words echoed in her thoughts, stirring something deep and primal. All her life she had accepted her status as broken, incomplete, the girl without a wolf. The villagers' whispers had become the background noise of her existence, as constant and unremarkable as the sound of wind through trees. Until yesterday, when the Alpha King himself had looked at her with recognition that defied explanation. "Are you going to tell me what happened last night?" Fiona asked, appearing in the doorway with tousled dark hair and suspicious eyes. At 18, her sister had already grown into a formidable beta, fiercely protective and stubborn as the mountains themselves. Sage turned, weighing her words carefully. "The king knew our father." Fiona snorted. "That's not what I meant, and you know it. The entire village is talking about how Thorn Blackcrest couldn't take his eyes off you, and then Lord Ravenclaw shows up, Magnus acts like a complete animal, and suddenly we're under royal protection." She folded her arms. "Something is happening, Sage. Something that involves you." Before Sage could respond, a sharp knock at the door startled them both. Fiona tensed, moving instinctively between Sage and the entrance. When she pulled the door open, Roland stood on their threshold, his weathered face solemn in the morning light. "Lady Moonvale," he greeted formally. "The king requests your presence." Fiona's eyes narrowed. "Requests or demands?" Roland regarded her with unexpected respect. "His Majesty extends an invitation. However, given yesterday's events with Lord Ravenclaw, I would advise accepting for your own safety." Sage stepped forward. "May I know the purpose?" "The king believes he has information about your heritage that you should know." Roland's gaze softened slightly. "Your mother's lineage, specifically." Those words struck like lightning. Sage had grown up with precious little knowledge of her mother's family. Helena Moonvale had been reticent about her past, taking many secrets to her grave. "Give me a moment to prepare," Sage decided. As Roland waited outside, Sage hurriedly changed into a simple dress of deep blue, her fingers trembling slightly as she braided her hair. Fiona watched with growing concern. "I'm coming with you," she declared. "The king may not welcome—" "I don't care," Fiona interrupted. "Where you go, I go, especially when it involves kings and lords suddenly taking interest in my sister after 22 years of treating you like you're invisible." "Shay." Sage couldn't argue with her logic. Something had shifted fundamentally in the world, and she wasn't fool enough to face it alone. When they emerged, Roland seemed unsurprised by Fiona's presence. He led them through the village, where curious eyes tracked their progress. Whispers followed in their wake, but for once, Sage didn't shrink from the attention. Something about yesterday's encounter with Thorn had awakened a dormant pride in her, a sense that she was more than the villagers' limited perception. Headman Thaddeus had surrendered his modest home for the king's use. As they approached, Sage noticed royal guards stationed discreetly around the perimeter. One looked at her with startled recognition, quickly bowing his head in unexpected respect. Inside, Thorn Blackcrest stood by the hearth, his powerful frame silhouetted against the morning light. He wore no crown, dressed instead in the practical attire of a warrior rather than a monarch. At their entrance, he turned, and Sage felt the same inexplicable pull she'd experienced the night before, like gravity shifting its center. "Lady Moonvale," he greeted, his deep voice filling the small room, "and Lady Fiona, thank you for coming." Fiona stepped forward. "Let's dispense with pretense, Your Majesty. Why have you called my sister here? What do you want with her?" Roland tensed at the impertinence, but Thorn's lips curved slightly. Direct and protective, admirable qualities in a beta. His golden eyes shifted to Sage. "I imagine you have questions as well." Sage held his gaze, summoning courage she hadn't known she possessed. "Many, starting with how you knew my father and what you meant about my blood being a gift." Thorn gestured to the table where several ancient books lay open. "Please sit. This conversation is long overdue." As the sisters settled themselves, Thorn remained standing, his presence too commanding to be contained by something as mundane as a chair. "Your father, Eric Moonvale, served under my banner during the Unification Wars. He was a brave man who saved many lives, including mine during the Battle of Twin Rivers." "I was 7 when he left," Sage said softly. "I barely remember him." "He spoke of you often," Thorn replied. "Of both of you. He carried a sketch your mother had drawn, 2 little girls with eyes like spring leaves." Something in his expression shifted, becoming more guarded. "What I didn't know then was your mother's lineage." He turned one of the books toward them. On the page was a family tree, branches extending back centuries. At the top was a name that made Sage's breath catch. Silverleaf. "My mother's maiden name," she whispered. Thorn nodded. The Silverleaf bloodline was thought extinct after the Great Purge 3 centuries ago. They were known as Silver Omegas, wolves with extraordinary gifts of healing and amplification. Fiona leaned forward, skepticism written across her features. If they were so special, why were they purged? Fear, Roland answered from his position by the door. Silver Omegas could enhance the powers of their mates tenfold. When bonded to an alpha, particularly a royal alpha, they created pairs of unprecedented power, which threatened the delicate political balance between territories, Thorne continued. The Southern Lords orchestrated the purge, hunting down Silver Omega bloodlines until none were thought to remain. Sage stared at the family tree, tracing the line down to her mother's name. But she survived, somehow. Some families went into hiding, changing their names, suppressing their wolf nature, Thorne confirmed. They became nomadic healers, moving between territories, never staying long enough for anyone to notice their unusual gifts. That's why we moved so much when I was little, Sage realized, memories flooding back, before Father joined your army and we settled here. Thorne's gaze intensified. Silver Omegas have one distinctive trait that made them easily identifiable. Their wolves don't manifest until they meet their true mates. Until that moment, they appear wolfless. The implication hung in the air between them. Sage felt her world tilting on its axis as decades of shame and alienation suddenly reframed themselves into something entirely different. "You're saying I'm not broken," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "That I have a wolf, but it's dormant." "More than that," Thorne replied. "Silver Omegas possess healing abilities beyond ordinary wolves, even without their wolves fully manifested. Your mother was renowned for saving lives that should have been lost. I suspect you've inherited similar gifts." Fiona made a small sound of realization. "The villagers who recover too quickly under your care, the wounds that heal without scarring." She stared at her sister. "Everyone attributed it to your herbal knowledge, but it was always something more." Sage's mind raced through countless memories, patients who recovered from mortal wounds, fevers that broke under her touch when all hope seemed lost. She had always believed it was her mother's training, her careful study of healing arts, but there had been moments when something else had flowed through her, something beyond conscious control. "If what you say is true," Sage said carefully, "then why tell me now? Why has no one recognized this before?" Thorne and Roland exchanged glances, and Sage sensed they had reached the heart of the matter. "Because Silver Omegas are meant to bond with specific wolves, their true mates," Thorne said, his voice dropping lower. "When they encounter that wolf, their dormant nature begins to awaken." Understanding dawned with the force of a lightning strike. Sage stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the wooden floor. "You believe I'm your mate. That's why you looked at me that way at the festival." Thorne didn't deny it. "My wolf recognized yours the moment our eyes met." Fiona leapt to her feet. "This is insane. You're the Alpha King. Sage is a village healer who's been ostracized her entire life, and suddenly you claim she's your destined mate because of some ancient bloodline?" "Fiona," Sage cautioned, though her own thoughts mirrored her sister's skepticism. "No, she's right to question," Thorne said, surprising them both. "I would expect nothing less from family looking to protect their own." His expression hardened. "But there are greater concerns than whether you believe my claim. Lord Victor Ravenclaw arrived at the festival mere hours after I showed interest in you. That was not coincidence." Roland stepped forward. "Victor has been investigating the Silverleaf lineage for years. We believe he's been monitoring your family, possibly since before your mother's death." A chill ran down Sage's spine. Why would he care about my bloodline? Because a Silver Omega bonded to the Alpha King would create an unassailable monarchy, Thorne answered bluntly. "The territorial lords have maintained influence by ensuring the crown remains dependent on their allegiance. A true mate bond between us would threaten that balance of power." "You think Victor had something to do with my mother's death?" Sage said, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. Thorne's silence was answer enough. Fiona shook her head in disbelief. "This is madness. Even if Sage is what you claim, even if she's your Mate, we can't just abandon our home based on ancient histories and political conspiracies. You may not have a choice, Roland interjected gently. After last night's confrontation with Magnus, the Ravenclaws know we've taken interest in your sister. If Victor suspects what Sage truly is, your lives are already in danger. Sage sank back into her chair, overwhelmed. In the span of a single conversation, everything she had believed about herself had been upended. She was not cursed or incomplete. She was rare, valuable, potentially powerful, and somehow, inexplicably, tied to the most dominant alpha in the realm. "What do you propose?" she asked finally. "Return with me to Stormhold Castle," Thorn said. "Both of you. There you will be protected while we determine the extent of Victor's knowledge and intentions." "And if I refuse?" Something flickered in Thorn's golden eyes. Respect, perhaps, for her unwillingness to simply acquiesce. "Then I would station guards here in Willowvale, though I cannot guarantee your safety as effectively. Victor has spies throughout the realm." Fiona crossed her arms. "So our choices are the cage of a castle or the cage of royal protection here?" "Your choice," Thorn corrected, "is between life and death. Victor Ravenclaw has eliminated every potential threat to his ambitions over 2 decades. He will not hesitate to add you to that list." Silence fell over the room as the sisters absorbed the gravity of their situation. Sage stared at her hands, thinking of the quiet life she had built despite the village's disdain. She had her garden, her healing work, a small but meaningful existence. To leave would mean abandoning everything familiar, stepping into a world of politics and power that she had never imagined. Yet staying meant danger, not just for herself, but for Fiona. If what Thorn claimed was true, if she truly was a Silver Omega with dormant abilities, then remaining in Willowvale placed everyone she cared about at risk. "I need time to think," she said at last. "This is too much to process at once." Thorn nodded, though tension remained evident in his powerful frame. "You have until sundown. My entourage departs for Stormhold at first light tomorrow." As they prepared to leave, Thorn moved unexpectedly closer to Sage. The sudden proximity sent her pulse racing, her senses acutely aware of his scent. Pine forests after rain, with undertones of something wild and untamed. "One last thing," he said quietly, his voice for her alone. "Should you choose to remain here, I would respect your decision. But know this, the bond I feel is already formed. Distance will not diminish it." Something in his words resonated deep within her, stirring sensations she had never experienced. For a fleeting moment, Sage felt a presence within her consciousness, not quite a voice, not quite a separate entity, but a stirring of something long dormant. If what Thorn claimed was true, it was her wolf, responding to the proximity of its mate. Outside, the village continued its morning routines, oblivious to the seismic shifts occurring within the headman's modest dwelling. As Sage and Fiona emerged, they found themselves at the center of curious stares and whispered speculation. Word of their private audience with the king had spread faster than wildfire. "What will you do?" Fiona asked as they walked briskly toward their cottage. Sage shook her head. "I don't know. Everything I've believed about myself for 22 years has just been overturned in the span of a conversation." "You can't possibly be considering going with him," Fiona pressed. "Sage, he's the Alpha King. His world is nothing like ours." "And yet, if what he says is true, I belong in that world in ways neither of us understood." Sage pushed open their cottage door, seeking the familiar comfort of her herbs and books. Mother must have known. All those stories she told us about special bloodlines, about wolves who were more than they appeared, they weren't just bedtime tales. Fiona followed her inside, frustration evident in every movement. "Even if you are this Silver Omega, even if the king is your true mate, that doesn't mean you have to upend your entire life. You've built something here, despite how the village treats you. Your healing work matters." "And what if staying puts that work at risk?" Sage countered, gathering herbs with restless energy. "What if Lord Victor truly means us harm?" "Then we'll face it together, as we always have." A knock at the door interrupted their debate. Both sisters tensed, but when Sage opened it, she found only a young village boy holding a sealed message. "From the Royal Guard, miss," he said, thrusting the parchment toward her before darting away. The seal bore the black crest emblem, a wolf with silver-tipped fur howling beneath a crescent moon. Sage broke it open, her eyes scanning the elegant script. "Lady Moonvale, I understand your hesitation and respect your need for time. However, I must caution you that Lord Victor's men have been observed watching your cottage. Whatever you decide, exercise extreme caution until dawn. My guards will remain vigilant, but they cannot be everywhere at once. The choice remains yours, but consider this. Some destinies find us whether we seek them or not. T." "What does it say?" Fiona demanded. Sage handed her the message, watching her sister's expression darken as she read. "Convenient timing," Fiona muttered. "Create a threat, then offer protection." "You think he's lying about Victor?" Fiona sighed, her anger deflating. "No, I saw how Magnus looked at you last night, and Lord Victor has always shown unusual interest in our family. But that doesn't mean the king's intentions are any more trustworthy." Sage moved to the small chest where she kept her mother's most precious possessions. From within, she withdrew a leather-bound journal written in a language few could read, the ancient tongue of wolves, preserved only in the oldest families. Though Sage had never been formally taught, the words had always made intuitive sense to her, another mystery now explained by her heritage. "Mother wrote about the silver omegas," she said, turning yellowed pages with careful fingers. "I always thought they were legends, cautionary tales about wolves who grew too powerful." She stopped at a particular entry. "But look here. She specifically mentions the Silverleaf line and their unique traits. The wolf sleeps until the heart recognizes its other half." Fiona peered over her shoulder. "Even if it's true, even if you are this rare Omega, that doesn't mean you have to go with Thorn. You could acknowledge the connection, but maintain your independence." Sage wished it were that simple. Already she could feel something changing within her, an awareness that hadn't existed before yesterday. When she thought of Thorn, her pulse quickened and her skin warmed. The dormant presence she'd sensed earlier stirred again, like a creature shifting in deep slumber. "I need to understand what's happening to me," she said finally. "And if Lord Victor truly is a threat, I can't put the village at risk by staying." Fiona's expression hardened. "Then I'm coming with you. Fiona, your life is here. The pack respects you. You have friends, prospects. My life is with my sister." Fiona cut her off. "Do you really think I'd let you walk into a castle full of strangers alone? Besides," she added with grim humor, "someone needs to keep an eye on this king who's suddenly decided you're his destiny." Sage embraced her sister tightly, gratitude overwhelming her. Whatever lay ahead, she wouldn't face it alone. As dusk approached, they packed their meager belongings, clothing, herbs, books, and the precious mementos of their parents. The cottage that had been their sanctuary for 15 years suddenly seemed small and vulnerable, its walls too thin to protect against the forces gathering around them. A soft knock at the door startled them both. Fiona positioned herself protectively as Sage opened it, revealing not royal guards or messengers, but Alara, the oldest woman in the village. "I saw you packing," the ancient beta said without preamble. "You're leaving with the king." It wasn't a question. Sage stepped back, allowing Alara to enter. The old woman had been her mother's closest friend, though she had kept her distance after Helena's death. "It's not safe for us to stay," Sage explained. Alara nodded, her rheumy eyes knowing. "Helena always said this day would come. She knew what you were, child, even if she couldn't tell you." From the depths of her shawl, she produced a small wooden box. "She left this with me, to give you when the time was right." The box was carved with intricate patterns of wolves and moons, sealed with silver wire that seemed to glow faintly in the fading light. Sage accepted it with trembling hands. "What is it?" "Open it when you reach Stormhold," Alara instructed. "Not before. It contains truths you're not yet ready to face." Her gaze shifted to Fiona. "Watch over your sister. The path of a Silver Omega is never easy, especially one bonded to a king." "You knew," Fiona accused. All these years you knew what Sage was, and you said nothing while the village treated her like an outcast. It was the only way to keep her safe, Elara replied, unrepentant. If Victor had suspected, neither of you would have lived to see adulthood. With that cryptic statement, the old woman departed, leaving the sisters staring at the mysterious box. "Is there anyone in this village who hasn't been keeping secrets from us?" Fiona demanded bitterly. Sage carefully tucked the box into her pack. "We'll find answers at Stormhold, one way or another." As night fell, they finished their preparations. Sage wrote a letter to her apprentice, explaining her absence and entrusting the girl with caring for patients until a new healer could be found. Fiona secured their few valuables and extinguished the hearth fire for what might be the last time. A soft rustle outside the window caught Sage's attention. Peering through the curtains, she glimpsed a shadow moving between houses, too large to be a village child, too furtive to be a neighbor. Her pulse quickened as she recalled Thorne's warning about Victor's men. "Fiona," she whispered urgently, "we're being watched." Her sister joined her at the window, eyes narrowing as she tracked the movement. "Back door," she decided. "Now." They gathered their packs silently, years of sisterly communication allowing them to move in perfect synchronization. The cottage's rear exit opened onto the herb garden, which in turn backed against the forest edge. If they could reach the trees unseen, they might circle around to the headman's house where Thorne's guards were stationed. The night air bit at their skin as they slipped outside, cloaks drawn tight against the spring chill. Sage led the way through the familiar paths of her garden, every step deliberate and silent. Behind them, a quiet thud signaled someone entering their cottage through the front door. "Run!" Fiona mouthed, and they bolted for the tree line. Shouts erupted behind them, male voices, angry and urgent. Heavy footfalls pursued them into the darkness of the forest, branches whipping at their faces as they ran blindly through familiar yet treacherous terrain. Sage's lungs burned, her human endurance no match for the wolves who hunted them. A root caught her foot, sending her sprawling onto the damp earth. Pain shot through her ankle, sharp and immediate. Fiona skidded to a halt, doubling back to help her sister. "Leave me," Sage gasped. "Get to Thorne." "Not a chance," Fiona growled, hauling Sage to her feet. "Together or not at all." The voices grew closer, accompanied by the distinctive sound of wolves shifting forms. Their pursuers had abandoned human limitations, unleashing their wolves to hunt more effectively. "We can't outrun them," Sage realized with sinking dread. Fiona pushed her behind a massive oak, pressing a small dagger into her hand. "Stay hidden. If I can lead them away—" "No!" Sage clutched her sister's arm. "I won't let you sacrifice yourself." A low growl interrupted them, far too close for comfort. They froze, watching as a massive gray wolf emerged from the undergrowth, its eyes gleaming with malicious intelligence in the darkness. Behind it came two more, flanking them with practiced precision. "Lord Victor sends his regrets," a voice called from the shadows. "He had hoped to discuss your heritage more civilly." Magnus Ravenclaw stepped into a shaft of moonlight, his handsome features twisted with arrogance. "But you forced a more direct approach by consorting with the king." Fiona pushed Sage further behind her, knife raised defensively. "The king will hunt you to the ends of the earth if you harm us." Magnus laughed. "The king is currently occupied with a border dispute that mysteriously erupted an hour ago. By the time he realizes you're missing, there will be nothing left to find." One of the wolves lunged forward, snapping at Fiona's legs. She slashed with her knife, drawing a yelp of pain as the blade connected. But they were hopelessly outnumbered, surrounded by enemies with superior strength and speed. "My father would prefer you alive," Magnus continued, circling them like prey. "But accidents do happen in the forest. Wild animals. Tragic, really." Sage felt coldness spreading through her veins, not from fear, but from a strange, sudden clarity. As Magnus advanced, something stirred within her, not quite awakening, but stretching, becoming aware. The sensation was foreign, yet intimately familiar, like remembering a dream long forgotten. "You know what I am?" she said, stepping forward despite Fiona's attempt to keep her back. That's why you've been watching our family for years." Magnus's eyes narrowed. "My father suspected. Helena Moonvale was too skilled a healer to be ordinary. But you were harder to identify without your wolf." "And now?" Sage kept her voice steady, playing for time while her mind raced for a way out. "Now it's too late," Magnus snarled. "The king has recognized you, and that cannot be permitted." He nodded to the wolves, who tensed to spring. Fiona pushed Sage behind her one final time, ready to fight to the death to protect her sister. The attack never came. A thunderous roar shattered the night, followed by a blur of movement so fast it defied comprehension. Something massive and pale as moonlight crashed into the lead wolf, sending it flying into a tree trunk with bone-crushing force. The other wolves scattered in panic, only to be hunted down with ruthless efficiency. Thorn Blackcrest stood before them in partial shift, neither fully man nor fully wolf. His features had elongated, canines extended into deadly fangs, claws replacing fingernails. His eyes blazed with primal fury, fixed on Magnus with murderous intent. "You dare!" he growled, the words barely recognizable through his transformed vocal cords. "You dare touch what is mine!" Magnus backed away, genuine fear replacing his earlier arrogance. "My father will hear of this," he warned, though his voice shook. "Attacking a noble son, your father," Thorn advanced with predatory grace, "has committed treason by sending assassins after a woman under royal protection. Give me one reason I shouldn't tear out your throat where you stand." For a moment, Sage thought he would do it. The rage emanating from Thorn was palpable, a physical force that seemed to electrify the air around them. She had heard of alpha rage, the berserker fury that could overtake even the most controlled wolves, but witnessing it was another matter entirely. "Thorn," she called softly, instinctively using his name rather than his title. "We're unharmed." His head snapped toward her, golden eyes wild with bloodlust. For a heartbeat, she feared he was too far gone to recognize her. Then, gradually, awareness returned to his gaze. His features began to shift back, though the dangerous aura surrounding him remained. "Sage," he acknowledged, his voice rough. "Fiona." Royal guards materialized from the trees, surrounding Magnus and the surviving wolves with drawn weapons. Roland appeared at Thorn's side, assessing the situation with a veteran's eye. "Take Lord Magnus and his men into custody," Thorn ordered. "Charges of attempted kidnapping and assault against protected royal subjects." Magnus's face contorted with hatred. "You've signed their death warrants, Your Majesty. My father won't stop until the Silverleaf line is extinguished completely." "Your father," Thorn replied coldly, "will be too busy defending himself against charges of treason to pursue anyone." As the guards led Magnus away, Thorn turned his attention fully to Sage and Fiona. His gaze swept over them, checking for injuries with meticulous care. When he spotted Sage favoring her injured ankle, he was beside her in an instant. "You're hurt," he stated, concern replacing rage. "It's nothing," Sage assured him. "Just a sprain from the fall." Without warning, Thorn lifted her into his arms as though she weighed nothing at all. The sudden proximity sent her senses reeling. His scent enveloped her, strong and distinctly male, while his body heat penetrated her clothing where they touched. "What are you doing?" she gasped, suddenly breathless for reasons that had nothing to do with their flight through the forest. "Taking you somewhere safe," he answered simply. "Both of you," he added with a nod to Fiona, who looked torn between gratitude and suspicion. As they emerged from the forest, Sage saw that the village had been roused by the commotion. Curious and frightened faces peered from windows and doorways, watching as their king carried the ostracized healer through the main street. For once, the whispers that followed held no mockery or disdain, only confusion and dawning respect. "The border dispute?" Sage asked, remembering Magnus's taunt. "A ruse," Thorn confirmed grimly. "My scouts intercepted a messenger carrying orders to create a diversion. We allowed them to believe it had worked while setting our own trap." "You knew they would come for us tonight," Fiona realized. Thorn's expression darkened. "I suspected Victor would not wait once he realized I had identified you. I had guards watching your cottage, but Magnus's men were more numerous than anticipated." They reached the headman's house, where a small contingent of royal guards stood at attention. Inside, preparations for immediate departure were already underway. "We leave for Stormhold now," Thorn announced, carefully setting Sage on a chair. "Victor will send more men once he learns of Magnus's capture." "But Dawn is hours away," Fiona protested. "Traveling at night." "Is safer than remaining here," Roland interjected, entering with their packs, retrieved from where they'd dropped them in the forest. "The king's personal guard can protect you on the road better than a village full of potential informants." Sage winced as a guard knelt to examine her ankle. The man's touch was gentle, but clinical, as he wrapped the injury with practiced efficiency. "It's not broken," he reported, "but she shouldn't walk on it for a day or two." Thorn nodded. "She'll ride with me." The prospect sent an unexpected thrill through Sage's body, followed immediately by apprehension. The events of the past 2 days had upended her entire existence, thrusting her into a world of politics and danger she was ill-prepared to navigate. Yet beneath the fear and uncertainty lurked something else, a sense of rightness, of pieces long scattered finally coming together. As the guards finished preparations, Thorn knelt beside her chair, his imposing presence somehow reassuring rather than intimidating. "I know this isn't the choice you wanted," he said quietly. "But I swear on my crown, Sage Moonveil, you will be safe at Stormhold, you and your sister both." She studied his face, searching for deception and finding none. Whatever else Thorn Blackcrest might be, he was not a liar. "And after we reach Stormhold?" she asked. "What then?" Something flickered in his golden eyes. Not quite vulnerability, but a rare glimpse behind the mask of absolute authority. "Then we discover what it means to be fated to one another. No expectations, no demands, just truth." In that moment, looking into the eyes of the most powerful alpha in the realm, Sage made her decision. Not from fear or necessity, but from a place of growing certainty that had nothing to do with ancient prophecies or political machinations. "Then let us find truth together," she said, sealing a pact whose consequences neither of them could fully comprehend. Outside, horses stamped impatiently in the cool night air. The journey to Stormhold Castle would take 3 days, across territories that had known peace for 2 decades, but now simmered with renewed tensions. Sage Moonveil, healer, orphan, outcast, was about to enter a world of power and intrigue beyond anything she had imagined. And deep within her, something stirred and stretched, awakening from a lifelong slumber. Her wolf, patient, powerful, and until now completely unknown, had begun the long journey to consciousness, drawn inexorably toward the mate fate had chosen before either of them drew breath. The hour had struck. The Silver Omega was coming home. Stormhold Castle rose from the mountainside like an ancient sentinel, its stone towers reaching toward the heavens as though challenging the gods themselves. Dawn light gilded the eastern face, transforming cold granite into molten gold, while the western side remained shrouded in shadow. A fortress both beautiful and formidable, much like the man who ruled from within its walls. 3 days of hard riding had brought them to this moment. 3 days of tension and vigilance, sleeping in shifts with guards posted in ever-widening circles around their camps. 3 days of Sage pressed against Thorn's solid warmth as they rode together, her injured ankle making it impossible to manage her own mount. 3 days of growing awareness between them, a connection that deepened with each passing hour. Now, as they approached the massive iron gates, Sage felt both relief and trepidation. Her body ached from the journey, unaccustomed to such prolonged riding. Yet beneath the physical discomfort lurked something far more unsettling. The sensation of her dormant wolf stirring more frequently, responding to Thorn's proximity in ways she barely understood. "Impressive," Fiona murmured, riding alongside them. Despite her exhaustion, her eyes swept the castle's defenses with appreciative assessment. 7 layers of fortification, if I'm counting correctly. 8, Roland corrected from her other side. The innermost courtyard has a secondary wall, barely visible from this angle. Thorn's voice rumbled against Sage's back, his breath warm against her ear. Stormhold was built during the First Territorial Wars, when Alphas fought with both steel and magic. Every stone was laid with defensive enchantments. Magic? Sage questioned. Tales of wolf magic had been dismissed as legend in her lifetime, stories to entertain pups rather than historical fact. The old powers, Thorn confirmed, largely forgotten now, but the evidence remains in places like this. As they approached, the gates swung open without command or visible signal. Guards snapped to attention, fists pressed to hearts in salute to their king. Their eyes widened slightly at the sight of Sage seated before Thorn on his midnight stallion, but their discipline held firm, expressions revealing nothing. The main courtyard bustled with activity that paused momentarily as the royal entourage entered. Servants, soldiers, and courtiers alike turned to stare at the unexpected arrivals, particularly the two unknown women accompanying their king. Whispers rippled through the gathered crowd, and Sage fought the urge to shrink against Thorn's chest. A tall, distinguished woman with silver-streaked dark hair stepped forward, her regal bearing marking her as someone of significance. "Your Majesty," she greeted with a formal curtsy, "we did not expect your return for another week." "Circumstances changed, Lady Helena," Thorn replied, dismounting with fluid grace before reaching up to help Sage down. His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, steadying her as she tested her injured ankle. "Prepare guest chambers in the royal wing for Lady Moonvale and her sister." Lady Helena's eyebrows rose fractionally, the only indication of her surprise at this command. The royal wing was typically reserved for family and the highest-ranking nobility. "Of course, Your Majesty, and shall I inform the council of your return?" "Not until tomorrow," Thorn decided. "Tonight, our guests need rest and medical attention." As servants hurried to carry out his orders, Thorn turned to Sage and Fiona. "Lady Helena is my seneschal. She oversees the castle and its staff. You can trust her discretion." Helena's keen eyes assessed the sisters with intelligent curiosity. "If you'll follow me, ladies, the royal physician will attend you shortly." Sage hesitated, suddenly reluctant to be separated from Thorn after days in such close proximity. Something of her thoughts must have shown on her face, for his expression softened marginally. "We will speak later," he promised quietly, "after you've had time to rest and refresh yourselves." Roland stepped forward. "I'll escort them, my king. There are matters requiring your immediate attention." With a final lingering glance at Sage, Thorn nodded and strode toward the inner keep, his commanding presence parting the curious onlookers like a blade through water. Lady Helena led them through a bewildering maze of corridors and staircases, each more ornate than the last. Tapestries depicting great battles and legendary hunts adorned stone walls, while intricately carved wooden doors marked entrances to countless chambers. Guards stood at attention at key intersections, their eyes tracking the strangers in their midst with professional detachment. "The castle has stood for 8 centuries," Helena explained as they walked, "though King Thorn has renovated much of it since taking the throne. The royal wing was completely rebuilt after the last territorial war." "It's enormous," Fiona remarked, her usual bravado diminished by the sheer scale of their surroundings. "How many people live here?" "The permanent household number's around 400, Helena replied. "During council sessions or royal gatherings, that number can triple." They reached a curved staircase of polished marble, ascending to a corridor more richly appointed than those below. Here, the floors were covered with plush carpets, and the wall sconces held crystal rather than simple iron. "The royal wing," Helena announced, stopping before a set of double doors carved with intricate wolf designs. "These will be your chambers, Lady Sage." The room beyond stole Sage's breath. Sunlight streamed through tall windows overlooking the forested mountains, illuminating space that could have contained her entire cottage 5 times over. A massive 4-poster bed dominated one wall, draped with fine linens in shades of forest green. A sitting area with comfortable chairs surrounded a hearth large enough to stand in, while doorways led to what appeared to be private bathing chambers and dressing rooms. "Your sister's rooms connect through there," Helena indicated a side door. "The king thought you might prefer to remain close to one another." Fiona's chambers proved equally impressive, though decorated in deep blues rather than greens. Both rooms contained fresh flowers, pitchers of cool water, and platters of fruit and bread, as though their arrival had been anticipated for days rather than hastily arranged. "The royal physician will attend you shortly," Helena informed them. "In the meantime, I've arranged for baths and fresh clothing. Is there anything else you require?" Sage glanced down at her travel-worn dress, suddenly acutely aware of how out of place she must appear in these luxurious surroundings. "You're very kind, but we're fine," Fiona interrupted with surprising diplomacy. "Thank you for your hospitality, Lady Helena." After the seneschal departed, Fiona turned to Sage with wide eyes. "What in the moon's name have we gotten ourselves into? These rooms are fit for royalty." "I believe that's precisely the point," Sage murmured, trailing her fingers over the silken bed covers. "The king wants to make a statement about our status." "Our status?" Fiona echoed skeptically. "Or yours?" Before Sage could respond, female servants arrived with steaming water for the baths and armfuls of clothing. They worked efficiently, filling copper tubs with scented water and laying out an assortment of gowns, undertongues, and accessories for the sisters' selection. Left alone to bathe, Sage sank gratefully into the heated water, letting it soothe her travel-weary muscles. She examined her ankle, pleased to find the swelling had subsided significantly. The sprain had been minor, more inconvenience than injury, though it had provided the excuse for her to ride with Thorn, an arrangement she suspected had been as much his preference as necessity. As she washed away the grime of travel, her thoughts turned to the wooden box Alara had given her, now safely stowed in her pack. "Open it when you reach Stormhold," the old woman had instructed. With hesitant hands, Sage retrieved the box, settling back in the bath as she carefully unwound the silver wire that sealed it. Inside lay 3 items: a silver pendant shaped like a crescent moon, a small vial of clear liquid, and a folded letter in her mother's handwriting. With trembling fingers, Sage opened the letter first. "My dearest daughter, if you are reading this, then the time has come for you to learn the truth of your heritage. By now, you know you are Silver Omega, the last daughter of the Silverleaf line. What you may not yet understand is why this matters. The pendant enclosed belonged to my mother, and her mother before her, passed down through generations of Silver Omegas. It is made from true silver, not the common metal that bears the name, but the magical essence of our bloodline crystallized into physical form. Wear it always, for it will protect you from those who would exploit your gifts before they fully mature. The vial contains essence of moonflower, gathered under the full moon and blessed by my own blood. Should you find yourself overwhelmed as your wolf awakens, 3 drops under your tongue will calm the process without halting it entirely. Use it sparingly. There exists no more in this world, for the knowledge of its making died with my mother. You will have questions, so many questions. Trust in Eldra at the castle. She was my mentor before circumstances forced our separation. She serves as royal historian now, though her true role is guardian of the old ways. Find her, show her this letter, and she will guide you through what comes next. One final truth, my darling. Silver Omegas do not merely amplify their mates' powers. In the proper bond, we transform them. The stories of madness and death that surround our kind were fabrications created by those who feared what we represent. Perfect balance between alpha dominance and omega intuition. Your father died protecting this secret. I may well have done the same by the time you read these words. Trust your wolf when it finally speaks to you. Trust your heart when it recognizes its other half. But trust no one else completely until they have earned it through actions, not words or titles. With all my love, Mother Tears blurred Sage's vision as she carefully refolded the letter. So many secrets, so many layers of deception and protection that had shaped her life without her knowledge. She lifted the pendant, watching sunlight play across its polished surface. The silver seemed to capture light and transform it, creating depths and patterns that shifted as she turned it in her hands. A soft knock interrupted her contemplation. "Lady Moonvale?" a male voice called. "Royal Physician Galen, here to examine your ankle." Hurriedly drying herself and donning the provided robe, Sage secured the box and its contents before admitting the physician, a middle-aged beta with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. He examined her injury efficiently, applied a salve that smelled of wintergreen and something more exotic, then wrapped it with a clean bandage. "A minor sprain," he confirmed. "The swelling has nearly subsided. I recommend minimal walking today, but by tomorrow you should be able to move freely with only mild discomfort." After he departed, Sage selected the simplest gown from those provided, a flowing creation of sage green that complemented her eyes. The fabric was finer than anything she'd ever worn, soft against her skin, yet substantial enough to provide warmth in the castle's cool air. She fastened her mother's pendant around her neck, tucking it beneath the gown's neckline where it rested cool against her skin. Fiona entered through the connecting door, similarly attired in a gown of midnight blue. "These clothes," she gestured with bemused exasperation. "I feel like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life." "Perhaps we are," Sage replied softly, "at least until we understand our place here." A servant arrived to guide them to the castle library, where Roland awaited them. The old warrior's weathered face brightened at their appearance. "You look rested," he observed. "The journey was harder on you both than you let on." "We're fine," Fiona assured him, though the dark circles beneath her eyes belied her words. "Just eager to understand what happens next." Roland gestured them toward a quiet alcove where chairs had been arranged around a small table laden with refreshments. "The king asked me to explain some aspects of castle life while he attends to urgent matters." His expression grew more serious. "Word of Lord Magnus's arrest has reached Lord Victor. Ravens arrived an hour ago." "What does that mean for us?" Sage asked, tension returning to her shoulders. "It means caution is even more essential," Roland replied. "You'll have guards assigned to you at all times, though they'll be discreet. The official explanation for your presence is that you're here as guests of the crown in recognition of your father's service." "And the unofficial reason?" Fiona pressed. Roland's gaze shifted to Sage. "That remains between you and the king for now. The fewer who know of your heritage, the safer you'll be." A tall, slender woman with silver-streaked hair coiled in an elegant knot approached their alcove, her steps nearly silent on the library's stone floor. Despite her advanced years, she moved with the fluid grace of a much younger woman, and her amber eyes held wisdom accumulated through decades of observation. "Roland," she greeted, her voice melodious despite its age. "Are these our mysterious guests?" "Eldra," Roland confirmed, rising respectfully. "May I present Lady Sage Moonvale and her sister, Lady Fiona." Sage's breath caught. Eldra, the very woman her mother's letter had mentioned. She studied the historian carefully, searching for any indication of recognition. Eldra's gaze lingered on Sage's face, something like recognition flickering in her eyes. "Helena said you favored your mother, but the resemblance is truly remarkable. Helena Moonvale was a gifted healer." "You knew my mother?" Sage asked, though the answer seemed obvious. A sad smile touched Eldra's lips. "Many years ago, when she studied ancient healing arts here at Stormhold, before she met your father and chose a different path." Sage glanced at Roland, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Taking a deep breath, she withdrew her mother's letter from her pocket. "She left instructions to find you." Eldra accepted the folded paper with reverent care, reading its contents with an expression that shifted from surprise to profound emotion. When she finished, she returned it to Sage and sank gracefully into a chair. "So it begins again," she murmured, "after all these years." "What begins?" Fiona demanded, her protective instincts clearly activated by the historian's cryptic words. Eldra's gaze swept the library, ensuring they remained unobserved. "The awakening of a silver omega, the potential for balance to be restored." She leaned forward, lowering her voice further. "Your mother was my most promising student, with a natural affinity for the old magics that flow through silver bloodlines. When she discovered she was carrying you, Sage, she knew you would inherit the full measure of the Silverleaf gifts." "These gifts," Sage pressed. "What exactly are they? Everyone speaks of silver omegas as though they're creatures of legend, but no one has explained what we actually are. Not creatures of legend, Eldra corrected gently. Guardians of balance. In the ancient days, before territories and politics divided our kind, wolves lived by simpler truths. Alphas protected, betas served, and omegas healed. But certain bloodlines carried stronger connections to these primal forces. Roland picked up the explanation. Alpha royals like the Blackcrest line could command not just their packs, but the elements themselves, fire, water, earth, and air bent to their will. Silver omegas like the Silverleaf line could heal not just bodies but spirits, and could see the threads of fate that bound all living things. When these bloodlines joined, Eldra continued, the resulting pairs created perfect balance between power and wisdom, strength and healing. They were revered as the embodiment of the moon goddess's blessing. Until the territorial wars, Sage guessed, pieces falling into place. Until power became something to hoard rather than balance. Eldra nodded approvingly. The Southern Lords, particularly the Ravenclaw line, discovered they could increase their own power by consuming the life force of silver omegas. They began hunting them systematically, draining them of their gifts through dark rituals before killing them. Horror crawled up Sage's spine. And that's what Lord Victor wants with me? To consume my powers? It's what his ancestors did, Roland confirmed grimly. Whether he intends to continue that legacy remains to be seen, though his actions suggest he's at least aware of the potential. This is insane, Fiona declared. You're talking about magic and rituals and bloodlines like they're real, not just stories to frighten children. Eldra's expression remained serene. The modern world has forgotten much of what once was common knowledge, but the old powers never truly vanished. They merely sleep in the blood, waiting to be awakened. Before the conversation could continue, a young guard appeared at the entrance to their alcove. Lady Moonveil, he addressed Sage with a respectful bow. The king requests your presence in his private study. Fiona immediately tensed. I'll come with you. The invitation was for Lady Sage alone, the guard specified apologetically. Sage touched her sister's arm reassuringly. It's all right, I'll be fine. You can trust Thorn with your sister's safety, Roland assured Fiona. No harm will come to her in his presence. Though clearly unhappy with the arrangement, Fiona relented. Sage followed the guard through the castle's winding passages, ascending staircases and traversing corridors until they reached a secluded wing that hummed with quiet power. Guards flanked massive wooden doors carved with the Blackcrest emblem, opening them without announcement as they approached. The king's private study was not what Sage expected. Rather than the ostentatious display of wealth and power she had imagined, the chamber was a scholar's sanctuary. Walls lined with books and maps, comfortable seating arranged before a hearth where flames danced merrily. Large windows overlooked the mountains, bringing natural light to illuminate the space. Thorn stood by one of these windows, his powerful frame silhouetted against the afternoon sky. He had changed from travel clothes into attire befitting his station, though he wore no crown, no obvious symbols of his rank. He turned at her entrance, and something in his expression, a momentary softening, sent warmth cascading through her. Lady Moonveil, he greeted formally. Thank you for coming. Your Majesty, she responded in kind, dropping into the curtsy she'd hastily practiced. I could hardly refuse a royal summons. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. You could. You strike me as someone who would refuse even a king if you believed it right. Sage straightened, surprised by his perception. Perhaps, but curiosity would have brought me regardless. He gestured toward the seating area. Please, be comfortable. Your ankle? Healing well, she assured him, settling into a chair that seemed designed for someone of her stature. Your physician believes I'll be fully recovered by tomorrow. Thorn poured 2 goblets of wine from a crystal decanter, offering one to her before taking the chair opposite. Up close, Sage could see the fatigue etched around his eyes, the weight of responsibility that never fully left his shoulders. I imagine you have questions, he began. More than I can count, she admitted. though I've learned much from Eldra already." Interest sharpened his gaze. "So you've met our royal historian. What did she tell you?" "About silver omegas, about the old powers, about why Lord Victor might want me dead, or worse." Sage took a steadying breath. "But she couldn't tell me what you expect of me now that I'm here." Thorn set his untouched wine aside, leaning forward with elbows on knees. The posture made him seem less like a king and more like a man grappling with forces beyond his control. "What I expect," he said carefully, "is to protect you while we both come to understand what this connection between us means. Nothing more." "Nothing more?" Sage challenged gently. "You brought me to the royal wing, clothed me like nobility, and assigned guards to watch my every move. Those are not the actions of a king merely offering protection to a subject." A low chuckle escaped him, surprising them both. "You see clearly, Sage Moonvale." The use of her given name sent a pleasant shiver through her. "Very well. Honesty between us, always." He rose, moving to retrieve a book from a nearby shelf. The tome was ancient, its leather binding cracked with age, pages yellow and fragile as he carefully opened it before her. On the displayed page was an illustration of a man and woman, hands clasped as silver light surrounded them. Ancient text in the wolf language bordered the image. "The ritual of recognition," Thorn explained. "When a royal alpha encounters a silver omega, tradition demands formal acknowledgement of the potential bond." "Potential?" Sage questioned, studying the illustration with fascination. "True mate bonds are rare, even between compatible bloodlines. The ritual determines whether what we feel is genuine recognition or merely the echo of ancient compatibility." His voice dropped lower. "If it is genuine, you deserve to know before making any decisions about your future." Sage absorbed this information, aware of the respect inherent in his approach. He could have claimed her outright, used his royal authority to demand what ancient tradition suggested was his by right. Instead, he offered choice, verification, certainty. "What does this ritual involve?" she asked. "Nothing invasive," he assured her. "Palm to palm, eye to eye, in the presence of witnesses who understand the old ways. If the bond is true, our wolves will recognize each other beyond doubt." "And if it isn't?" Something flashed in his golden eyes, too quickly gone to interpret. "Then you would be free to choose your own path, though you would remain under my protection for as long as Victor poses a threat." Sage's fingers found her mother's pendant beneath her gown, drawing strength from its cool weight against her skin. "When would this ritual take place?" "Traditionally, at the full moon." Thorn returned the book to its shelf. "Which gives us 3 weeks to prepare, should you consent." 3 weeks. The time frame both relieved and disappointed her. Part of Sage longed for immediate confirmation, while another part quailed at the speed with which her life was transforming. "And in the meantime?" she asked. "In the meantime, you and your sister will be honored guests. You'll have freedom to move about the castle and grounds, though guards will accompany you for safety. You'll be introduced to the court gradually, to avoid drawing undue attention." He paused, then added, "And we will have opportunity to know one another as people, not merely as potential mates." The consideration in his plan touched her. "Thank you for understanding this is overwhelming." Thorn's expression softened further. "I have had 20 years to prepare for the possibility of a true mate. You have had days to adjust to a completely new understanding of yourself. I would be a poor potential partner indeed if I did not grant you time." The word partner, rather than mate, caught Sage's attention. It suggested equality rather than possession, respect rather than dominance. "There is one more matter," Thorn continued, his tone becoming more formal. "The council meets tomorrow. Lord Victor will be present, as his position entitles him to attend despite his son's imprisonment." Sage tensed. "He'll know I'm here." "He will," Thorn confirmed. "Which is why I must ask, would you prefer to remain completely secluded during his visit, or would you be willing to appear publicly as my honored guest?" "You want to use me as bait," she realized. "As a declaration," he corrected firmly. If Victor sees you under my open protection, he'll understand that any move against you would be an unambiguous act of treason. Sage considered the strategy, but it would also confirm his suspicions about what I am. He already suspects, Thorne pointed out. Magnus's capture ensures that. The question is whether we hide, suggesting weakness, or stand openly, demonstrating strength. The logic was sound, if uncomfortable. And Fiona? Would be presented as equally honored, with no distinction made between you. Thorne's gaze held hers steadily. I would never place either of you in genuine danger, Sage. The council chamber will be heavily guarded, and Victor would not dare act against you in such a public setting. Sage took a moment to gather her thoughts. The political maneuvering was unfamiliar territory, yet she recognized the necessity. If I appear, what would be expected of me? Nothing beyond your presence, Thorne assured her. You would be introduced as the daughter of a fallen war hero, honored for your father's sacrifice and your own service as a healer. You would observe the council proceedings from the gallery, not participate. The plan seemed reasonable, though the prospect of facing Victor Ravenclaw, the man who might have orchestrated her mother's death and her own isolation, made her stomach clench with apprehension. I will need to discuss this with Fiona, she decided, but if she agrees, then so do I. Relief flickered across Thorne's features. Thank you. Your courage continues to impress me. They spoke for another hour, the conversation shifting to lighter topics, castle life, court customs, the history of Stormhold. Throughout, Sage found herself drawn to Thorne's intelligence and unexpected moments of dry humor. The fearsome Alpha King revealed himself to be thoughtful and articulate, with a deep knowledge of subjects ranging from architecture to herbal medicine. As afternoon light faded toward evening, Thorne escorted her back to the royal wing himself, their guards maintaining a respectful distance. At her chamber doors, he paused. There will be a small dinner tonight, he informed her. Just us, your sister, Roland, and perhaps Eldra, if you wish her presence. Nothing formal. That sounds perfect, Sage replied, suddenly aware of how close they stood, of the subtle scent that was uniquely his, pine forests and mountain stone, with an underlying note of something wild and compelling. Thorne's gaze dropped briefly to her lips, before returning to her eyes, the golden depths darkening with unspoken desire. For a breathless moment, Sage thought he might kiss her. Instead, he took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles, in a gesture both courtly and intimately possessive. Until tonight, he murmured, then released her and strode away, leaving Sage with racing pulse and burning skin where he had touched her. Inside her chambers, Fiona waited impatiently, pacing the luxurious room like a caged predator. Finally! What did he want? What did he say? Did he pressure you about this mate nonsense? Sage sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted by the emotional complexity of the day. No pressure. He's proposed a ritual to confirm whether we're truly mates, but not until the full moon. 3 weeks from now, Fiona calculated, frowning. And until then? Until then, we're honored guests. Sage relayed the conversation, including Thorne's request regarding the council meeting. Fiona's frown deepened. He wants to parade you before Victor, after everything that's happened? Not parade, Sage corrected. Make a statement. Show that I'm under royal protection and not hiding in fear. It's dangerous. So is hiding, apparently. Sage sighed, rubbing her temples where tension had gathered. At least this way, any move against me would be public and undeniable. Fiona studied her sister closely. You trust him, she realized, surprise evident in her tone. After just a few days, you actually trust the Alpha King. Sage considered the observation. I don't know if trust is the right word yet, but I believe his intentions toward me are honorable. And I believe he genuinely wants to protect us both. Because you might be his mate, Fiona pointed out skeptically. Perhaps, Sage acknowledged. Or perhaps because he's a better man than we initially assumed. Fiona threw up her hands in exasperation. The great and terrible Alpha King, a better man. What next? Lord Victor hosting charity events for orphaned pups? Despite everything, Sage laughed. The sound felt foreign after days of tension, but wonderfully releasing. After a moment, Fiona joined her, their shared mirth a momentary respite from the gravity of their situation. As their laughter subsided, Sage grew serious again. "Will you stand with me tomorrow? At the council meeting?" Fiona's response was immediate and fierce. "Always. Wherever you go, whatever you face, I'm at your side. That's what sisters do." Sage embraced her tightly, gratitude overwhelming her. Whatever else might change in this new life thrust upon them, Fiona's loyalty remained her one constant. Outside their windows, the sun dipped behind the western mountains, casting long shadows across Stormhold's imposing silhouette. Somewhere within the castle's ancient walls, an alpha king prepared to introduce a potential mate to his court. Elsewhere, a southern lord plotted revenge for his son's imprisonment and the escape of his intended prey. And deep within Sage Moonvale, a dormant wolf stirred with increasing awareness, drawn inexorably toward its other half across the bonds of fate and bloodline. The Silver Omega was awakening, one heartbeat at a time. The stage was set. Tomorrow, the world would begin to change. The great hall of Stormhold Castle had stood witness to centuries of wolf politics. Alliances formed and broken, wars declared and peace negotiated, rulers crowned and deposed. Its vaulted ceilings soared overhead, supported by massive stone columns carved with the history of the 7 territories. Tall windows of leaded glass cast dappled light across the assembled nobles and dignitaries, while braziers warmed the perpetually cool mountain air. Sage stood at the entrance, momentarily frozen by the grandeur and the weight of countless eyes turning in her direction. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she fought the instinct to retreat. Beside her, Fiona squeezed her hand reassuringly, her presence an anchor in unfamiliar waters. "Remember," Roland murmured from behind them, "you are honored guests of the crown. Hold your heads high." The sisters had been dressed with care for this moment. Sage wore a gown of deep emerald silk that complemented her eyes, its design elegant without ostentation. Silver embroidery at the hem and sleeves echoed the pendant concealed beneath her bodice. Fiona's gown mirrored her sister's in style, but was crafted in midnight blue, emphasizing the subtle differences between them despite their similar features. At the far end of the hall, Thorn sat upon a throne carved from ancient heartwood, its surface polished by generations of Blackcrest rulers. He wore formal regalia today, a tunic of black and silver beneath a cloak fastened with the royal insignia, a simple crown of platinum resting upon his dark hair. Despite these trappings of monarchy, it was his natural authority that commanded the room, the inherent power of an alpha in his prime. Beside the throne, arranged in tiered seating, sat the territorial council, representatives from each of the 7 major territories that comprise the kingdom. Most were male, though Sage noted 3 women among them, their expressions ranging from curious to hostile as they observed the newcomers. And there, seated prominently among them, was Lord Victor Ravenclaw. Even without prior knowledge, Sage would have recognized him as Magnus's father. They shared the same aristocratic features, the same cold calculation in their eyes. But where Magnus's arrogance had been youthful and untempered, Victor's held the dangerous edge of experience. He watched her approach with the focused intensity of a predator assessing prey, his expression betraying nothing, while his eyes missed nothing. The hall fell silent as Roland announced them formally. Lady Sage Moonvale, daughter of the honored war hero Eric Moonvale, and her sister, Lady Fiona Moonvale. Guests of His Majesty, King Thorn Blackcrest. Sage curtsied deeply, as protocol demanded, Fiona mirroring her movement with unexpected grace. When she straightened, she found Thorn's golden gaze fixed upon her, warm approval evident despite his regal bearing. "Lady Moonvale," he acknowledged, his deep voice carrying effortlessly through the hall. "Your father's sacrifice for this kingdom has not been forgotten. We welcome you and your sister to Stormhold." "Your Majesty honors us," Sage replied, grateful that her voice remained steady. "We are humbled by your generosity." A subtle gesture from Thorne directed them to seats positioned to the right of the throne, a placement whose significance wasn't lost on the assembled council. These were not the positions of mere honored guests, but of individuals under direct royal protection. The message could not have been clearer had Thorne announced it explicitly. As they took their places, Sage felt the weight of Victor's stare like a physical touch. She resisted the urge to shrink away, instead meeting his gaze directly. Something flashed in his eyes, surprise perhaps at her boldness or calculation as he reassessed his strategy. The council proceedings began with traditional formalities, reports from the territories, discussions of trade agreements, disputes requiring royal adjudication. Through it all, Sage observed the political dynamics at play. Though Thorne clearly commanded respect, several council members demonstrated subtle resistance to his authority, particularly those aligned with the southern territories. Victor spoke rarely but effectively, his interventions precisely targeted to undermine royal initiatives while maintaining a veneer of constructive input. His political skill was formidable, his understanding of court dynamics evident in every carefully chosen word. This was not a man who would attack directly when indirect methods proved so effective. "And now," Thorne announced as lesser matters concluded, "we must address the incident in Willowvale." The hall tensed perceptibly, attention sharpening as the king continued. 3 nights ago, Lord Magnus Ravenclaw and several armed men attempted to abduct Lady Sage and Lady Fiona Moonvale from their home. When confronted, they attacked royal guards and threatened the lives of women under crown protection. Victor rose smoothly, his expression one of pained concern. "Your Majesty, if I may speak to this grave accusation." Thorne inclined his head, permission granted though his eyes remained watchful. "I am deeply disturbed by these allegations against my son," Victor began, his tone perfectly modulated to convey parental distress. "Magnus has always been impetuous, but I cannot believe he would knowingly defy royal authority." "He was captured at the scene," Roland pointed out from his position near Thorne, "along with men bearing your house insignia." Victor spread his hands in a gesture of helpless confusion. "Which is why I wonder if there has been some terrible misunderstanding. My son mentioned meeting the Moonvale sisters at the festival and expressing admiration. Perhaps in his youthful enthusiasm, he approached them inappropriately, but surely abduction was not his intent." The audacity of the lie nearly took Sage's breath away. Beside her, Fiona tensed, barely restraining herself from speaking out. "Lord Magnus made his intentions quite clear," Thorne responded, his tone deceptively mild, though Sage could sense his controlled anger. "He spoke of orders from you, Lord Victor, orders regarding Lady Sage specifically." A ripple of murmurs passed through the assembled nobles. Victor's expression remained composed, though a muscle ticked in his jaw. "My son often misinterprets my words, Your Majesty. If he claimed to act on my behalf, he was mistaken. I would never sanction action against anyone under royal protection." Victor's gaze shifted to Sage, something predatory in his assessment. "Though I confess curiosity as to why a village healer with no noble lineage warrants such extraordinary attention from the crown." The question hung in the air, its implications clear to everyone present. Victor had thrown down a challenge, forcing Thorne to either reveal Sage's significance or appear to be acting on personal whim rather than royal prerogative. "Lady Moonvale's heritage is not the concern of this council," Thorne replied, his voice hardening perceptibly. "Her status as a guest of the crown is sufficient explanation for the protection afforded her." Victor bowed slightly, conceding the point while yielding nothing. "Of course, Your Majesty. I meant no disrespect to your guest." The slight pause before the final word carried insinuations that made Sage's cheeks warm. Around the chamber, speculative glances and whispered comments suggested Victor's implication had found fertile ground. "Lord Magnus remains in custody pending further investigation," Thorne continued, deliberately steering the conversation back to the matter at hand. "This council should be aware that any action against royal guests will be treated as an attack on the crown itself." The warning was unmistakable. Several council members shifted uncomfortably, while others studied Sage with renewed interest. She maintained her composure, back straight and expression neutral, though internally she marveled at the vicious complexity of court politics. As the council moved to other matters, Sage felt a strange sensation building within her, a pressure behind her breastbone, a heightened awareness that bordered on discomfort. Her mother's pendant seemed to grow warmer against her skin, and for a moment the voices in the hall became muted, as though she listened from underwater. "Danger," whispered something deep within her consciousness. Not a fully formed voice, but an impression, an instinct rising from parts of herself previously dormant. "He means death." Sage's gaze snapped to Victor, who had resumed his seat but continued watching her with calculating intensity. As their eyes met, she felt a surge of something. Not quite power, not yet, but the precursor to it, like the gathering pressure before a storm breaks. The pendant beneath her gown pulsed once, a flash of heat against her skin that subsided as quickly as it had risen. The strange awareness receded, leaving Sage momentarily disoriented. She reached instinctively for Fiona's hand, grounding herself in her sister's solid presence. "Are you all right?" Fiona whispered, concern evident in her expression. Sage nodded slightly, unwilling to draw attention. "Just overwhelmed," she murmured, though the explanation felt inadequate even to her own ears. The council session concluded an hour later with formal dismissal by Thorn. As nobles began to disperse, Victor approached their seating area with the confidence of a man accustomed to moving through the highest echelons of society. "Lady Moonvale," he greeted, offering a courtly bow that somehow managed to convey condescension rather than respect. "Allow me to personally apologize for any distress my son may have caused you. Magnus has always been passionate in his pursuits." Sage rose to face him directly, aware of guards subtly shifting closer. "Your son threatened my life and my sister's, Lord Victor. That goes beyond passion into criminality." Victor's smile never reached his eyes. "Youth and poor judgment, I assure you. Perhaps in time, with greater maturity, he might properly court your favor under more appropriate circumstances." "My sister isn't interested in your son's favor under any circumstances," Fiona interjected, her diplomatic restraint clearly at its limits. "Of course," Victor conceded smoothly. "I meant no offense." His gaze returned to Sage, assessing her with unsettling thoroughness. "I knew your mother, you know. Helena Silverleaf was exceptional, a rare talent." The deliberate use of her mother's maiden name sent a chill down Sage's spine. "You seem well informed about my family, Lord Victor." "I make it my business to understand bloodlines," he replied, emphasis subtle but unmistakable. "Heritage shapes destiny, after all." Before Sage could respond, Thorn materialized at her side, his presence a tangible force that seemed to displace the air around him. Though he maintained a courteous expression, the warning in his golden eyes was unmistakable. "Lord Victor," he acknowledged coolly, "I trust you found today's council productive." "Illuminating, certainly," Victor replied, gaze shifting between Sage and Thorn with calculated assessment. "Your Majesty has always had a gift for surprising revelations. And you for misinterpreting them," Thorn countered, his tone pleasant despite the underlying steel. "Lady Moonvale and her sister have had a taxing morning. If you'll excuse us." It wasn't a request. Victor bowed again, the gesture precise in its adherence to protocol while somehow suggesting mockery. "Of course, Your Majesty. Ladies, it has been a pleasure." As he withdrew, Sage released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "He knows," she whispered, pitching her voice for Thorn's ears alone. "About my bloodline." "He suspects," Thorn corrected, guiding her and Fiona toward a side exit where Roland waited. "But suspicion is not certainty, and without certainty, he cannot act openly." "Yet he acts regardless," Fiona pointed out, "just with enough plausible deniability to evade consequences." Thorn's expression darkened. "Not for much longer. Victor's political maneuvering has been tolerated because he maintained the appearance of loyalty. That facade is crumbling." They retreated to a private antechamber where servants had prepared refreshments. Once the doors closed behind them, Sage sank gratefully into a chair, the tension of the morning catching up with her. "You did well," Roland told the sisters, pouring cool water from a silver pitcher. Many first-timers at council barely maintain their composure, let alone face down Victor Ravenclaw. I felt something, Sage said suddenly, hand rising to touch the hidden pendant. During the council, like a presence, a voice, but not quite formed. Thorn exchanged significant glances with Roland. "Your wolf," he said quietly, beginning to stir. "It warned me about Victor," Sage continued, struggling to articulate the sensation. "Not in words exactly, but in feelings, impressions." "The Silver Omega instinct," Roland explained. "Your bloodline has always had heightened sensitivity to threats, even before full awakening. The pendant your mother gave you likely amplifies that connection." Fiona leaned forward, her skepticism momentarily set aside. "You're saying Sage can sense intentions? Read minds?" "Not minds," Thorn clarified. "Energies. Threats. The pendant helps focus abilities that are still developing." Sage considered this, remembering the pulse of heat against her skin when Victor's gaze had met hers. It felt protective, like it was shielding me from something. "True silver has defensive properties," Roland confirmed, "particularly against those with ill intent towards silver bloodlines." Thorn moved to the window, his broad shoulders tense beneath royal regalia. "Victor will accelerate his plans now. The public confrontation forces his hand." "Was that wise?" Fiona questioned bluntly. "Provoking him when Sage is still vulnerable?" "Better to face a known threat than wait for an unexpected strike," Thorn replied, turning back to face them. "Besides, Victor's position is more precarious than he realizes. Several council members have approached me privately with concerns about his recent activities. Political maneuvering won't stop an assassin's blade," Fiona muttered. "Which is why your training begins today," Thorn announced. Sage blinked in surprise. "Training?" "Self-defense primarily," Roland elaborated. "Basic combat skills suitable for your current abilities. As your wolf awakens, the training will adapt accordingly." "I can already fight," Fiona pointed out, a hint of pride in her assertion. Roland's weathered face creased in a brief smile. "You have natural instincts, Lady Fiona, but formal training will refine them. Both of you will benefit from these skills, regardless of what comes next." The prospect both intimidated and intrigued Sage. Her life as a healer had been focused on mending, not martial arts. Yet the events of the past week had demonstrated all too clearly that peaceful intentions provided no protection against those determined to do harm. "When do we begin?" she asked. "This afternoon," Thorn replied, approval evident in his expression. "After you've had time to rest from the council session, Marcus will oversee your initial assessment." "Marcus?" Sage questioned. "My combat master," Thorn explained. "He trains all royal guards and has experience working with wolves of varying abilities, including those without full manifestation." The day progressed more quickly than Sage anticipated. After a light meal and brief respite in their chambers, the sisters were escorted to a training yard nestled within an inner courtyard of the castle. Unlike the formal gardens visible from their windows, this space was purely functional. Packed earth surrounded by stone walls, various training equipment arranged strategically around the perimeter. Marcus proved to be a surprise. Sage had expected someone resembling Roland, weathered, stern, perhaps gruff in his instruction. Instead, they met a man in his early 30s with keen blue eyes and a reserved demeanor that suggested observation rather than judgment. His right arm bore a long scar from wrist to elbow, and he moved with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable in his own body. "Ladies," he greeted them with a respectful nod. "Welcome to your first lesson." The initial assessment was both humbling and enlightening. Marcus evaluated their existing abilities through simple exercises, testing balance, coordination, speed, and instinctive reactions. Fiona, as expected, demonstrated natural aptitude, her beta wolf providing enhanced physical capabilities even without formal training. Sage, to her surprise, discovered she wasn't entirely helpless. Years of gathering herbs in difficult terrain had given her good balance and stamina, while her healer's knowledge of anatomy translated unexpectedly well to understanding vulnerable points on an opponent's body. "You have potential," Marcus told her after an hour of evaluation. Different from your sisters, but valuable nonetheless. I have no wolf, Sage reminded him, wiping sweat from her brow. Not yet, he corrected. But even without it, you have attributes worth developing. Precision, patience, observation. He demonstrated a simple defensive stance. Power isn't always about strength. Sometimes it's about leverage, timing, and using an opponent's momentum against them. The lesson continued with basic techniques: how to break a grip, escape a hold, strike effectively despite smaller stature. By the time they finished, Sage's muscles ached pleasantly, and her mind buzzed with new awareness of her body's capabilities. Daily practice, Marcus instructed as they prepared to leave. Even 15 minutes will build muscle memory. Your bodies need to react without conscious thought when danger appears. As they returned to their chambers to bathe before dinner, Fiona nudged Sage's shoulder playfully. Not bad for a healer. You might make a warrior yet. Sage laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in days. I think I'll stick to mending rather than breaking, but it's good to know I'm not completely defenseless. That's the point, Fiona said, her expression growing more serious. Everyone here has agendas, Sage. Even Thorn, even Roland. We need to be able to protect ourselves if those agendas change. The reminder sobered Sage as they reached their rooms. Her sister wasn't wrong. They had been thrust into a world of complex political machinations where allies could become enemies with shifting circumstances. Yet something in her resisted viewing Thorn with such suspicion. The connection between them, whatever its nature, felt genuine in a way that transcended political calculation. After bathing and changing into fresh attire, Sage found herself drawn to the window overlooking the castle grounds. Below, royal guards conducted training exercises in precise formation, their movements synchronized through years of discipline. Beyond the castle walls, forests stretched toward distant mountains, wild and untamed, despite centuries of human and wolf habitation. A knock at the connecting door preceded Fiona's entrance. Eldra's here, she announced. Says she has information about Silver Omegas you need to hear. The royal historian waited in Sage's sitting area, several ancient texts arranged carefully on a small table. Her amber eyes brightened as Sage entered. Thank you for seeing me, she began without preamble. After observing the council meeting this morning, I believe we must accelerate certain aspects of your education. Sage settled across from her, curious despite her lingering fatigue. What aspects? Defensive techniques specific to Silver Omegas, Eldra replied, opening one of the books to a marked page. Victor Ravenclaw's interest in you is more dangerous than mere political maneuvering. His ancestors developed specific methods to neutralize your bloodline's natural protections. Fiona joined them, her skepticism momentarily set aside in favor of practical concerns. What methods? Eldra's expression grew grave. The Ravenclaws discovered that certain herbs, when properly prepared, can temporarily suppress a Silver Omega's abilities and connection to their wolf. These compounds are colorless, odorless, and nearly impossible to detect when mixed with food or drink. Poison, Sage surmised. Of a sort, Eldra confirmed. Not lethal in themselves, but they render a Silver Omega vulnerable to other procedures. The deliberate vagueness sent a chill down Sage's spine. The ritual draining that Roland mentioned? Eldra nodded solemnly. The ancient texts call it the harvest, a process by which a Silver Omega's life force and gifts can be transferred to another wolf, typically an alpha seeking to augment their natural powers. That's barbaric, Fiona declared, horror evident in her expression. It is, Eldra agreed, and forbidden under royal law for centuries, but the knowledge persists in certain families, passed down through generations like any other inheritance. Sage's hand went instinctively to her pendant, drawing comfort from its solid presence. How do I protect myself? First, by awareness, Eldra said, indicating the books she'd brought. These contain descriptions of the herbs and compounds used, enabling you to recognize them by sight and smell. Second, by this. From her robes, Eldra withdrew a small silver vial, no larger than Sage's thumb. 3 drops in any food or drink will cause it to change color if tampered with. Clear foods become blue, Dark foods lighten visibly. Sage accepted the vial carefully. My mother's letter mentioned moonflower essence for controlling the awakening process. Are there other preparations I should know about? Many, Eldra confirmed, though most are lost to time. I've been researching and recreating what I can from ancient texts, but it's slow work without a practicing Silver Omega to guide the process. They spent the next hour reviewing protective measures and historical accounts of Silver Omegas, who had successfully defended themselves against those seeking to exploit their gifts. The information was simultaneously empowering and terrifying, illuminating both Sage's potential and the dangers that accompanied it. As evening approached, Eldra gathered her books, leaving one slender volume behind. "Study this when you can," she instructed. "It contains meditation techniques to help manage the awakening process. Your wolf will become more active as the full moon approaches, and these exercises will help maintain balance." After Eldra departed, Sage examined the book with interest. Its pages contained diagrams of energy flows through the body, accompanied by text in the ancient wolf language. Though she had never formally studied the script, the words made intuitive sense to her, another mystery of her heritage. "More secrets," Fiona observed, peering over her shoulder. "Every day brings new revelations about abilities you didn't know you had." "It's overwhelming," Sage admitted. "I spent my entire life believing I was broken, incomplete. Now I'm told I'm rare, valuable, powerful, yet still vulnerable in ways I don't fully understand." Fiona squeezed her shoulder supportively. "We'll figure it out together, one day at a time." A servant arrived to escort them to dinner, leading the way to a private dining room rather than the formal Great Hall. The space was intimate but elegant, with a table that could seat 12 comfortably, though it was set for only 5 tonight. A fire crackled in the hearth, warming the room against the mountain chill that penetrated even the castle's thick walls. Thorn awaited them, having exchanged royal regalia for simpler attire that nonetheless emphasized his powerful physique. Roland and Eldra were already seated, engaged in quiet conversation that paused as the sisters entered. "Ladies," Thorn greeted them, inclining his head respectfully. "I trust your afternoon was productive?" "Marcus is an excellent teacher," Sage replied, taking the seat indicated to Thorn's right, a position of honor that didn't escape her notice. "Though I suspect I'll discover muscles tomorrow that I didn't know existed today." A hint of a smile touched Thorn's lips. "He has that effect on everyone, regardless of experience. Even I find myself sore after sessions with him." The casual admission humanized him in a way that Sage found unexpectedly appealing. Despite his status, despite the power that surrounded him like an aura, Thorn Blackcrest was still a man who could ache after physical exertion, who could appreciate good food and conversation beyond matters of state. Dinner progressed pleasantly, the conversation flowing more naturally than Sage had anticipated. Roland shared stories of Thorn's father that revealed a more nuanced picture of the previous king than historical accounts suggested. Eldra contributed fascinating snippets of castle history, including the origins of certain architectural features visible from their dining room windows. Throughout the meal, Sage found herself increasingly aware of Thorn's presence beside her. The subtle warmth radiating from his body, the controlled grace of his movements, the rumble of his voice when he spoke, all registered with heightened sensitivity that she attributed to her gradually awakening wolf. "You were quiet during council today," he observed during a lull in the broader conversation, his voice pitched for her ears alone. "Yet I sensed you missed nothing." "I was observing," Sage confirmed, "learning the dynamics between council members, identifying allies and opponents." Approval flickered in his golden eyes. "And your conclusions?" "Lord Stormhaven supports you completely," she replied, referencing the gruff alpha from the western mountains. "As does Lady Ironwolf from the north. The eastern representatives seem neutral, waiting to see which way the political winds blow. The southern territories are divided, though most lean toward Victor out of regional loyalty rather than genuine agreement with his positions." Thorn's eyebrows rose slightly, an astute assessment for someone witnessing council for the first time. "I spent years observing village politics," Sage explained with a small smile. "The scale is different, but human and wolf nature remains consistent regardless of setting." "You continue to surprise me, Sage Moonvale," Thorn murmured, his gaze warming in a way that sent pleasant heat coursing through her veins. The evening concluded with Thorn escorting the sisters back to their chambers. At Sage's door, he paused while Fiona tactfully continued to her own rooms, leaving them a moment of privacy. "Thank you for today," Sage said softly, "for allowing me to observe council, for arranging training, for everything." Thorn studied her face in the soft lamplight, his expression unguarded for perhaps the first time since they'd met. "You faced Victor with courage that seasoned warriors might envy," he told her. "Your strength continues to impress me." "I don't feel strong," Sage admitted. "I feel unprepared, like I'm rushing to learn rules for a game that's already in progress, where the stakes are life and death." "You're more prepared than you realize," Thorn countered. "And you're not alone in this game." His hand rose to brush a strand of hair from her face, the gesture achingly gentle from a man capable of such ferocity. "Rest well, Sage. Tomorrow brings new challenges." As his fingers touched her skin, a spark of energy passed between them, not metaphorical, but literal, a visible flicker of silver-gold light that startled them both. The pendant beneath Sage's gown warmed suddenly, while something deep within her consciousness stirred with greater awareness than before. "Mine," whispered that not-quite voice, the impression stronger than previous stirrings. "Ours." From Thorn's expression, momentary shock followed by intense focus, Sage suspected he had felt something similar. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed to just the two of them, the connection between them almost tangible in its intensity. Then Thorn stepped back, visibly collecting himself. "The bond strengthens," he observed, his voice rougher than usual, "even before the ritual." "Is that normal?" Sage asked, her own voice hardly steadier. "Nothing about this is normal," he replied with unexpected candor. "The joining of our bloodlines hasn't occurred in centuries. We navigate uncharted waters together." The admission should have frightened her. This uncertainty, this stepping into the unknown, with forces neither fully understood nor controlled. Instead, Sage found it oddly comforting that even the Alpha King faced the situation without perfect confidence, that they truly would discover their path together rather than following his predetermined course. "Good night, Thorn," she said simply, using his given name without titles or formality. Something in his expression softened further. "Good night, Sage. Dream well." As she entered her chambers and closed the door behind her, Sage pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks. The awakening of her wolf, the political machinations of court, the danger represented by Victor Ravenclaw, all receded momentarily before the simple reality of attraction, of connection, of possibility. Tomorrow would bring new lessons, new challenges, new revelations about her heritage and abilities. For tonight, Sage allowed herself to simply feel the lingering warmth of Thorn's touch, the stirring of her dormant wolf, and the first tentative blooming of something that might, given time and nurturing, grow into love. Outside her windows, the waxing moon climbed higher, its silver light touching the ancient stones of Stormhold. 2 weeks remained until the full moon would witness the ritual of recognition. 2 weeks of learning and preparation for whatever fate had written in the stars. For the first time since leaving Willowvale, Sage Moonvale slept deeply and dreamed not of danger, but of golden eyes and silver light intertwining in perfect harmony. The sacred valley stretched before them, bathed in early morning light that transformed ordinary landscape into something magical. Ancient stone monoliths, weathered by centuries of mountain storms, formed a natural amphitheater where ceremonial fires had burned since before written history. The air here felt different, charged with energy that raised goosebumps along Sage's arms despite the warmth of the summer day. "This is where it happens?" she asked, voice hushed with instinctive reverence. Thorn nodded, his powerful frame silhouetted against the rising sun. "The ritual of recognition has been performed here since the first pack claimed these territories. The old powers run strong in this place." 2 weeks had transformed Sage in ways both subtle and profound. Daily training with Marcus had strengthened her body, replacing the softness of village life with lean muscle and heightened reflexes. Lessons with Eldra had expanded her understanding of her heritage, awakening abilities that had lain dormant her entire life. The pendant her mother had left her rarely left her throat, its protective energies becoming an extension of her growing awareness. Most significant, however, was the change within. Her wolf, once a barely perceptible presence, now stirred with increasing frequency and clarity. Not yet fully conscious, but no longer completely dormant. In quiet moments, Sage could almost hear its voice, feel its emotions distinct from her own human ones. The sensation was simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. "Tomorrow night, the moon reaches fullness," Roland said, joining them at the valley's edge. The old warrior moved stiffly in the morning chill, his weathered face solemn. "All preparations are complete." Fiona appeared at Sage's side, her expression uncharacteristically serious. After initial skepticism, even she had come to accept the reality of Silver Omega heritage, though she remained watchful for any sign that Thorn's intentions were less than honorable. "And if the ritual confirms your true mates?" she asked bluntly. "What then?" The question hung in the air, unadorned by diplomatic niceties. It was the question that had hovered unspoken between them all as the full moon approached. What would follow confirmation of what they already sensed to be true? Thorn turned to face them fully, golden eyes meeting Sage's directly. "Then Lady Sage will have a choice to make. Recognition does not mandate claiming, not in my kingdom." The distinction was significant. In wolf tradition, recognizing a mate and claiming them were considered inseparable, the former naturally leading to the latter without question. That Thorn explicitly separated them, acknowledging Sage's right to choose even after confirmation, spoke volumes about his respect for her autonomy. "The Council expects an announcement regardless of the outcome," Roland warned. "Victor has been suspiciously quiet these past weeks. He's planning something." "Let him plan," Thorn replied, a hint of the predator evident in his tone. "We have prepared as thoroughly as possible." Indeed they had. Security throughout the castle had been enhanced, with trusted guards personally selected by Thorn, stationed at every entrance and patrol patterns adjusted to eliminate predictability. All food and drink was tested before serving, with Sage using the detection vial Eldra had provided as an additional precaution. Even their journey to Sacred Valley today had been arranged with multiple decoys to confuse potential observers. Yet beneath these practical measures lay deeper preparations, the gradual, intentional strengthening of the connection between Sage and Thorn. Each day had brought them together in some capacity, whether through formal training, shared meals, or simply walking the castle grounds in conversation. What had begun as tentative attraction had deepened into genuine affection and respect, a foundation more solid than mere instinct or tradition. "We should return," Thorn decided, scanning the horizon with a predator's vigilance. "The council session begins at midday, and Victor will be watching for any sign of weakness." The ride back to Stormhold passed in contemplative silence, each lost in thoughts of tomorrow's ritual and its implications. For Sage, anticipation mingled with lingering uncertainty. Despite 2 weeks of education and preparation, she still felt woefully inadequate for the role fate seemed determined to thrust upon her. Village healer to potential queen was a leap that occasionally left her breathless with its magnitude. At the castle gates, they separated, Thorn and Roland to prepare for council, Sage and Fiona to attend their daily lesson with Eldra. The royal historian had transformed a small chamber adjacent to the library into a workspace dedicated to Silver Omega studies, its shelves lined with ancient texts and artifacts related to Sage's heritage. "Ah, perfect timing," Eldra greeted them, looking up from a weathered tome. "I've discovered something about the ritual of recognition that may prove useful tomorrow." The sisters settled into their customary seats as Eldra retrieved a crystal vial containing silvery liquid that seemed to move with unnatural fluidity. "Essence of moonstone," she explained. "When applied to the pulse points before the ritual, it enhances a Silver Omega's natural receptivity to their true mate's energy signature." Sage studied the vial with interest. "Is it necessary? The connection between Thorn and me already grows stronger each day. Not necessary, Eldra acknowledged, but potentially beneficial. The ritual itself is straightforward: clasped hands, direct eye contact, spoken words of intention. But the actual recognition occurs on an energetic level that can be overwhelming for someone whose wolf is still awakening. Overwhelming how? Fiona questioned, ever vigilant for potential dangers. Eldra considered her response carefully. When an alpha and omega are true mates, the energy exchange during recognition can trigger immediate progression in the dormant wolf's awakening. Without proper grounding, this sudden acceleration can be disorienting, even temporarily debilitating. And this essence prevents that? Sage asked, reaching for the vial. It moderates the flow, Eldra corrected. Allows your consciousness to integrate the experience more gradually without diminishing its significance. Sage accepted the crystal container, tucking it safely into the pouch at her waist. 2 weeks ago, she might have questioned such mystical preparations, but experience had taught her that the old ways contained wisdom modern wolves had forgotten. Her healing abilities, once attributed solely to herbal knowledge, had expanded dramatically under Eldra's guidance, revealing innate gifts that defied conventional explanation. Now, Eldra continued, moving to a map spread across her work table, let us review the valley's energetic layout once more. There are points of particular power you should be aware of. The lesson continued until midday, when a messenger arrived with summons to the council chamber. Unlike previous sessions where Sage had observed from the gallery, today she was invited to sit among the council members themselves, a significant elevation in status that would not go unnoticed. "Ready?" Fiona asked as they hurried to change into formal attire. Sage smoothed the silk of her gown, deep emerald today, embroidered with silver thread and patterns that subtly evoked wolf symbolism. "As I'll ever be." The great hall hummed with tension when they arrived. Council members had arranged themselves in their usual factions, but conversations ceased abruptly at their entrance. All eyes tracked their progress as Roland escorted them to seats positioned directly beside the throne, places typically reserved for royal family. Thorn entered moments later, his regal bearing commanding immediate attention. Today he wore the full regalia of his office, formal tunic and cloak in the black crest colors, the platinum crown nestled among dark hair. Yet it was his presence, rather than these trappings, that dominated the chamber, the natural authority of an alpha in his prime. "Esteemed council," he began once seated, "we gather today to address matters of significance to all territories." And the session progressed with deceptive normality at first: reports from regional governors, discussion of harvest projections, allocation of resources for the coming winter. Through it all, Sage remained acutely aware of Victor Ravenclaw's calculating gaze. Unlike previous meetings where he had participated actively, today he observed in silence, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. Finally, as lesser matters concluded, Thorn addressed the subject that hung unspoken in the chamber. "Tomorrow marks the full moon," he announced. "As tradition dictates, I will undertake the ritual of recognition with Lady Sage Moonveil in Sacred Valley." Though this could hardly have surprised anyone present, the formal declaration sent ripples of reaction through the assembled nobles. Some nodded in approval, others exchanged concerned glances, while a few, particularly those aligned with southern territories, appeared openly displeased. Lord Stormhaven, the gruff alpha from the western mountains, rose to speak. "Your Majesty honors the old ways. The throne has been without a queen too long." "If I may," Victor interjected smoothly, rising from his seat with practiced grace. "While none would question your Majesty's right to choose a consort, some might wonder at the unusual haste of these proceedings. Lady Moonveil has been in residence barely 3 weeks, and her background remains something of a mystery to most of us." The implied criticism was carefully constructed, acknowledging royal prerogative while simultaneously undermining confidence in Thorn's judgment. "Lady Moonveil's lineage is well documented," Thorn replied, his tone deceptively mild, though Sage sensed the tension beneath. "Her father served with distinction in the Unification Wars. Her mother came from an old and respected bloodline." "Indeed," Victor conceded with a slight bow. Yet traditional protocol for royal matches typically involves more extensive vetting of potential consorts, medical examinations, lineage verification, confirmation of fertility, particularly important given the Blackcrest line currently has no heir. Several council members murmured agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably at such direct reference to royal succession. The ritual of recognition supersedes such protocols, Roland pointed out from his position near Thorn, as Lord Victor well knows. In traditional circumstances, certainly, Victor agreed, his tone reasonable though his eyes remained cold. But Lady Moonvale's unusual wolf status raises legitimate questions. Can a female without manifest wolf capabilities truly fulfill the duties of a queen? Can she bear heirs with the strength the Blackcrest line requires? Heat flashed through Sage at the deliberate insult, but before she could respond, Lady Ironwolf, the formidable alpha female who represented the Northern Territories, rose to her feet. "I find it curious," she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs, "that Lord Victor expresses such concern over traditions he himself has frequently challenged when convenient. Perhaps his interest stems less from protocol than from personal considerations." The subtle accusations silenced the chamber. Lady Ironwolf had been an ally of Thorn's father and remained one of the few council members who remembered the early days of the unified kingdom, including, presumably, the Ravenclaw family's historical ambitions. Victor's expression hardened momentarily before smoothing into practiced civility. "I speak only out of concern for the stability of the realm, Lady Ironwolf. These are uncertain times, and hasty decisions regarding succession could have far-reaching consequences." "The Council's concerns are noted," Thorn stated, effectively ending the discussion. "However, the ritual of recognition proceeds as planned. Should it confirm what we believe, further announcements will follow." Victor inclined his head in apparent acceptance, though the calculation in his eyes suggested retreating strategies rather than genuine concession. As the council session concluded, Sage found herself surrounded by curious nobles eager to assess this village healer who had captured their king's attention. She navigated their questions with increasing confidence, drawing on 2 weeks of intensive education in court protocols. Beside her, Fiona maintained vigilant watch, her protective instincts in full force despite her own growing comfort in royal surroundings. "You handled that well," Thorn murmured when they finally extracted themselves from the crowd. They walked together toward a private antechamber, guards maintaining discreet distance. Victor was deliberately provocative. "He wanted to unsettle me before tomorrow," Sage observed. "Make me doubt myself, question my place here." Thorn's expression darkened. "He underestimates you, a common error among those who mistake gentleness for weakness." The compliment warmed her, not least because she recognized its truth. The sage who had arrived at Stormhold, uncertain, overwhelmed, was not the same woman who walked these halls today. Though still learning, still adapting, she had found strength she hadn't known she possessed. In the antechamber, Roland awaited them with Marcus and Eldra, their expressions unusually grave. "What's happened?" Thorn demanded, instantly alert to their concern. "Magnus Ravenclaw has escaped custody," Marcus reported without preamble. 2 guards dead, another gravely wounded. Shock rippled through the room. Magnus had been held in a secure wing of the castle dungeons, guarded by experienced soldiers personally selected by Marcus. "How?" Thorn's voice held dangerous calm that belied the rage Sage could sense through their strengthening bond. "Inside help," Marcus replied grimly. "The guard rotation was altered without proper authorization. We're investigating who gave the orders." "Victor," Fiona stated with absolute certainty. "This is why he's been so quiet these past weeks. He was planning this." Roland nodded agreement. "The timing is hardly coincidental. With Magnus free and the ritual scheduled for tomorrow, he means to disrupt it," Sage concluded, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. "Or use it as distraction while attempting something worse." Thorn moved to the window, his powerful frame tense with controlled fury. Double the guards at all entrances. Restrict access to the royal wing. No one enters without direct approval from myself or Roland." "Already done," Marcus assured him. "I've also dispatched riders to Sacred Valley to ensure it remains secure for tomorrow." Eldra stepped forward, her aged face solemn. "There may be another concern. If Magnus has truly escaped, rather than being secretly released, Lord Victor may intend to sacrifice his son to achieve his larger objective." The suggestion brought stunned silence. Even among wolves accustomed to the brutality of politics, sacrificing one's own child was considered unconscionable. "Explain," Thorn commanded, though his expression suggested he'd already followed her reasoning. "The old texts describe rituals requiring blood sacrifice to augment alpha power," Eldra elaborated. "Specifically, blood of one's own line freely given or taken by force. With the full moon approaching and a silver omega potentially accessible—" "He wouldn't," Fiona protested, though uncertainty tinged her voice. "His own son?" "Victor's ambition knows no bounds," Roland said quietly. "If he believes it would secure him the throne, he would sacrifice anyone." Sage's mind raced, connecting fragments of knowledge gleaned from her studies with Eldra. The ritual would require specific timing, specific conditions. The full moon, yes, but also the conjunction, Eldra finished for her. When the moon aligns with the ancient star, the wolf texts call the Eye of the Hunter, which occurs tomorrow night, Thorn concluded grimly, during our ritual. The implications settled heavily over them all. What had been planned as a sacred ceremony of recognition now potentially faced corruption into something darker, Victor using the same cosmic timing to perform a ritual of entirely different purpose. "We should postpone," Fiona argued. "Wait until Magnus is recaptured, until Victor's plans are clear." Thorn shook his head. "Delay changes nothing except to signal weakness. Victor would simply adjust his strategy accordingly. Besides," Eldra added, "the conjunction occurs only once annually. The potency of the recognition would be significantly diminished if performed at any other time." Sage considered their options, drawing on everything she had learned about Silver Omega abilities. "What if we use Victor's expectations against him?" she suggested. "Let him believe his plan proceeds undetected, then turn it to our advantage." All eyes turned to her with varying degrees of surprise and interest. "Continue," Thorn encouraged, golden eyes intent upon her face. "Victor expects me to be vulnerable during the ritual," Sage explained, her confidence growing as the idea took shape. "My wolf awakening, my powers unstable and unfocused. He won't anticipate that I've been preparing specifically for this moment." Understanding dawned in Eldra's expression. The Moonstone essence, if properly amplified, it could not only protect you during recognition, but potentially create a defensive shield extending to those within the ritual circle. "Exactly," Sage confirmed. "And if Victor or Magnus attempts to corrupt the sacred site with blood magic, the backlash would rebound upon them," Roland finished, appreciation evident in his weathered features. "Clever. Very clever." "It's risky," Marcus cautioned. "Blood magic is unpredictable at best, catastrophic at worst. If the timing is even slightly miscalculated, then we ensure our timing is perfect," Thorn stated with finality. "Eldra, work with Sage to prepare the enhanced essence. Marcus, position your most trusted guards around Sacred Valley, visible enough to be noted but with others concealed to catch anyone attempting to approach secretly." "And me?" Fiona asked, clearly unwilling to be sidelined. "You'll accompany your sister during preparations," Thorn decided. "No one will anticipate that you might be part of our defensive strategy rather than merely a supportive presence." As the others departed to implement these plans, Thorn drew Sage aside, concern evident beneath his controlled exterior. "This places you at greater risk than I intended," he said quietly. "If you wish to reconsider—" "No," Sage replied without hesitation. "This is my heritage, my responsibility. Victor threatens not just us, but the balance of power your father fought to establish. I won't hide while others face that danger." Something fierce and approving flashed in Thorn's eyes. He raised one hand to her cheek, the contact sending familiar warmth cascading through her veins. "You would have made a formidable queen even without Silver Omega gifts," he murmured. The compliment touched her deeply, acknowledging her strength independent of bloodline or abilities. "Let's ensure I have the opportunity to prove that," she replied with a small smile. The remainder of the day passed in focused preparation. Eldra guided Sage through the complex process of enhancing the Moonstone essence, teaching her incantations in the ancient wolf language that would activate its protective properties. The work required intense concentration, drawing on Sage's innate connection to healing energies while infusing them with specific intent. By evening, a small vial of luminescent liquid rested in a silver container, its contents seeming to pulse with contained power. Sage secured it carefully in the special pouch Eldra had prepared, designed to shield its energies until needed. "Rest now," Eldra advised as they concluded. "Tomorrow will demand all your strength, both physical and spiritual." Despite the historian's counsel, sleep proved elusive. Sage lay awake long into the night, her mind reviewing preparations while her body hummed with anticipation. Her wolf stirred restlessly beneath her consciousness, more active than ever before, as if sensing the imminent completion of its awakening. Fiona, ever attuned to her sister's moods, eventually padded from her adjoining room to sit at the edge of Sage's bed. "Want to talk about it?" she offered simply. Sage pushed herself upright, grateful for the company. "What if I'm not ready?" she admitted, voicing the fear that lurked beneath her outward confidence. "What if my wolf doesn't fully awaken, or I can't control the protective energies?" "Then we adapt," Fiona replied pragmatically. "That's what we've always done, isn't it? Faced whatever came our way and figured it out together." The reminder brought a smile to Sage's lips. From childhood, they had indeed weathered each challenge as a unit. Sage's gentleness balancing Fiona's fierceness, Fiona's practicality grounding Sage's idealism. "Besides," Fiona continued with unexpected softness, "I've watched you these past weeks. You've changed, Sage, grown into something extraordinary. Whether your wolf fully awakens tomorrow or not, you're already more than capable of facing whatever comes." The words held no flattery, only simple truth as her sister saw it. Sage reached for Fiona's hand, squeezing it tightly in wordless gratitude. "Try to sleep," Fiona advised, rising to return to her own bed. "I'll wake you at dawn." Somehow, the conversation had settled Sage's restless thoughts. She drifted into dreamless slumber, her last conscious awareness the pendant warm against her skin and the steadily strengthening presence of her wolf, waiting just beyond the threshold of full consciousness. Dawn arrived with surprising clarity after the turmoil of the previous day. Sage woke feeling inexplicably centered, as though some inner alignment had occurred during sleep. The pendant at her throat pulsed once with silver light as she touched it, responding to her focused intent. The morning passed in final preparations. Sage bathed in water infused with sacred herbs, then dressed in ceremonial attire Eldra had helped design, a gown of silvery white fabric that seemed to capture and hold light, embroidered with symbols of protection and awakening in threads spun from true silver. Around her throat, her mother's pendant rested in plain sight rather than hidden, its presence a declaration rather than a secret. When she emerged from her chambers, Thorn awaited her in the corridor, his breath catching visibly at her appearance. He too wore ceremonial garments, deep black embroidered with silver and gold, emphasizing the breadth of his shoulders and the power contained in his warrior's frame. No crown adorned his head today. This ritual transcended royal status, returning to more primal traditions. "You are magnificent," he said simply, offering his arm. Sage accepted it, feeling the heat of his skin even through layers of fabric. "As are you." Roland and Marcus joined them, both armed and alert despite the ceremonial nature of the occasion. Fiona and Eldra completed their party, the younger woman dressed in blue that complemented Sage's silver white, the elder in traditional historian's robes marked with symbols of her office. They departed through the castle's eastern gate, where horses awaited to carry them to Sacred Valley. The journey passed without incident, though Sage noted Marcus constantly scanning their surroundings, guards positioned at regular intervals along their route. Whatever Victor planned, they were taking no chances with security. Sacred Valley looked different in daylight than it had during their pre-dawn visit the previous day. The stone monoliths cast shorter shadows, their weathered surfaces revealing intricate carvings only visible when the sun reached a certain angle. At the center of the natural amphitheater, a circle of white stones marked the ritual space, ancient runes etched into each one. "The preparations are complete," Eldra announced after inspecting the site. "The circle is purified and sealed against outside interference." Marcus positioned guards at strategic points throughout the valley, ensuring both visibility and protective coverage. "No unauthorized approach will go unnoticed," he assured Thorn. As noon approached, the traditional time for the ritual of recognition, Sage withdrew the enhanced moonstone essence from its protective pouch. With Eldra guiding her movements, she applied the luminescent liquid to her pulse points, wrists, throat, temples. The substance seemed to sink immediately into her skin, leaving behind a subtle silvery sheen that caught the light as she moved. "Remember," Eldra instructed quietly, "when the recognition begins, focus on the connection rather than resisting the intensity. Let the energies flow through you, but direct them with your intent." Sage nodded, centering herself with the meditation techniques she had practiced diligently. Within her, her wolf stirred with increasing alertness, sensing the imminent completion of its awakening. Thorn approached, his golden eyes reflecting the sunlight. "It is time," he said simply, extending his hand. Heart pounding with anticipation, Sage placed her palm against his. The contact sent immediate warmth spiraling up her arm, more intense than previous touches. Together, they walked to the center of the stone circle, facing one another as Roland, Fiona, and Eldra took positions at key points around the perimeter. "The ritual of recognition has been performed in this valley since the first pack claimed these lands," Thorn began, his voice carrying natural authority. "Today we honor that tradition, seeking confirmation of what our wolves have already sensed." "We come with open hearts and minds," Sage responded, the ritual words rising naturally to her lips, though she had not consciously memorized them. "Seeking truth, above all else." Thorn raised their joined hands between them, his free hand moving to mirror hers until they stood palm to palm, fingers intertwined. "I, Thorn Blackcrest, Alpha King, and protector of the 7 territories, stand before the Silver Omega to determine if the bond between us is true and destined. I, Sage Moonveil, daughter of the Silverleaf line, stand before the Alpha King to determine if the bond between us is true and destined," she replied, the ancient words flowing through her like water finding its natural channel. As the final syllable left her lips, energy surged between their joined palms, visible light spiraling outward in intertwined strands of gold and silver. The pendant at Sage's throat blazed with sudden brilliance, while the moonstone essence on her skin began to glow with increasing intensity. Thorn's eyes shifted from human gold to the luminous amber of his wolf, power rolling from him in palpable waves. Sage gasped as answering power rose within her, rushing through pathways in her body she hadn't known existed until this moment. At last came a voice within her mind, no longer mere impression, but clear communication. "We are one." Her wolf, fully awakened by the ritual energies and the presence of its true mate, rose to conscious awareness with overwhelming immediacy. Sage felt herself changing, not physically shifting form, but energetically transforming as dormant abilities activated throughout her being. The sensation was indeed overwhelming, as Eldra had warned, but the enhanced essence performed its function. Rather than being swept away by the awakening, Sage maintained awareness, directing the flow of energy with increasingly confident control. Through their joined hands, she sensed Thorn's wolf recognizing hers, ancient instincts confirming what they had suspected from their first meeting. The true mate bond crystallized between them, no longer potential, but actualized, a living connection that hummed with power and possibility. A sound like distant thunder rumbled through the valley, though the sky remained clear. The white stones marking the ritual circle began to glow with the same silver-gold light that surrounded Sage and Thorn, creating a protective dome that rippled like water disturbed by stone. "It is done," Eldra announced from the perimeter, satisfaction evident in her aged voice. "The recognition is complete and confirmed." Before they could celebrate this confirmation, shouts erupted from the valley's western approach. Guards rushed forward, weapons drawn, as figures emerged from concealing foliage. "My king!" Marcus called, urgency in his tone. "Intruders approaching, Magnus Ravenclaw and what appears to be ritual practitioners." Even as he spoke, a howl of rage echoed across the valley. Magnus, recognizing that the ritual he had intended to interrupt was already complete. Behind him, robed figures carried objects that gleamed ominously in the sunlight. "Blood ritual components," Eldra identified grimly. "They meant to corrupt the recognition with sacrifice." Thorn released Sage's hands, his body already tensing to shift forms and confront the threat. But Sage, acting on instinct guided by her newly awakened wolf, caught his arm. "Wait!" she commanded, her voice carrying unexpected authority. "The protective circle is established. Let them come." Understanding dawned in Thorn's expression. "The backlash." "Exactly," she confirmed. "If they attempt to breach the ritual space with blood magic while our energies are still active." Marcus grasped the strategy immediately, signaling his guards to hold position rather than engaging directly. "Let them approach the circle's edge," he ordered. "No further." Magnus Ravenclaw stalked forward, his handsome features contorted with fury, and something darker, a hint of madness that hadn't been present during their previous encounter. Behind him, 3 robed figures carried ceremonial daggers and crystal vials containing dark liquid. "You think you've won," he snarled, addressing Thorn directly. "But the Black Crest line ends today, one way or another." "Where is your father, Magnus?" Thorn questioned, his voice deceptively calm. "Did he send you to do his dirty work while he maintains plausible deniability?" Something flashed across Magnus's face, pain quickly masked by rage. "My father awaits at the sacred altar of Ravenheart to complete what I begin here. He performs the preparatory rituals even now." Sage exchanged glances with Thorn, this new information confirming their suspicions. Ravenheart was an ancient site deep in southern territory, a place of power like Sacred Valley, but with darker historical associations. "He's using you, Magnus," Sage said, stepping forward within the protection of the dome. "The ritual requires the sacrifice of bloodkin. Your father doesn't intend to share power with you. He intends to consume your life force to augment his own." Magnus faltered, doubt flickering across his features. "You lie. He promised me glory, recognition as his heir when the Black Crest line falls." "Did he tell you what happened to his brother?" Roland called from his position. "Your uncle Darius, who disappeared during a similar ritual 25 years ago?" The shock on Magnus's face confirmed he had never heard this story. "I have no uncle," he said, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. "You had," Roland corrected grimly. "Until your father sacrificed him in an attempt to gain power enough to challenge Thorn's father. The ritual failed because his ambition exceeded his knowledge, but Darius paid the price regardless." The robed figures grew visibly nervous at this revelation, several exchanging worried glances. One stepped forward, urgency evident in his hushed whispers to Magnus, who pushed him away roughly. "Enough lies," Magnus growled, though his earlier certainty had clearly been shaken. "We proceed as planned." He signaled his followers, who began a chanting invocation in the ancient wolf language, their voices creating discordant harmonics that raised hackles along Sage's spine. The power they summoned felt corrupted, tainted, a perversion of the natural energies that had flowed during the recognition. Within the protective dome, Sage felt her newly awakened wolf reacting to the threat, not with fear, but with righteous fury at this corruption of sacred energies. Power gathered within her, silver light pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. "They're attempting to breach the circle," Eldra warned, her voice tight with concern. "The protection will hold, but the energies they're channeling are dangerous regardless." Magnus raised a ceremonial dagger high, its blade catching sunlight as he began the final invocation. With royal blood spilled on sacred ground, I bind the Silver Omega's power to the Ravenclaw line. He brought the blade down toward his own palm, a willing sacrifice that would activate the corrupted ritual. The moment the edge touched his skin, drawing the first drops of blood, Sage acted on pure instinct. She pressed her palms against the inside of the protective dome, channeling her Silver Omega energy outward with deliberate intent. "Return to sender," she commanded in the ancient tongue, words she hadn't known she knew until that moment. The dome pulsed once, blinding in its intensity, then projected the corrupted energy back toward its source with amplified force. Magnus and his followers were thrown backward as if struck by physical blows, their ritual components shattering on impact with the stony ground. The ceremonial dagger spun from Magnus's hand, its blade slicing deeply across his palm as it fell. Blood, freely given rather than forcibly taken, spattered across the white stones marking the circle's boundary. For one heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the stones absorbed the crimson droplets, ancient runes flaring with sudden, blinding light. "No," Eldra breathed, recognition and horror mingling in her voice. "Willing sacrifice freely given." The light from the boundary stones shot skyward in crimson beams that converged high above the valley floor. The clear sky darkened as though storm clouds had gathered instantaneously, while the earth beneath their feet trembled with building power. "What's happening?" Fiona demanded, moving protectively toward her sister, despite the continuing glow of the protective dome. "The ritual activated, but not as intended," Eldra explained urgently. "Magnus's blood was given willingly, but in ignorance of true purpose. The old powers respond to intent rather than specific words or actions." Outside the circle, Magnus stared in confusion at the light show his blood had triggered, while his robed companions fled in evident terror. Within moments, he stood alone at the boundary, abandoned by those who had encouraged his sacrifice. "Magnus!" Sage called, compelled by Healer's instinct despite everything he had done. "Step away from the stones. The energy is unstable." Too late. The crimson beams collapsed inward, converging on the exact spot where Magnus stood. For one terrible moment, his form was illuminated from within, his expression transforming from confusion to horrified understanding. Then the light intensified beyond bearing, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When vision cleared, Magnus Ravenclaw was gone. Where he had stood remained only a scorch mark on the ancient stone, and a lingering sense of power redirected rather than dissipated. "What happened to him?" Fiona whispered, shock evident in her voice. Sage reached out with her newly awakened senses, probing the energies that still rippled around the scorched stone. "He's not dead," she said with certainty that surprised even herself. "Not destroyed, but transformed. I can still sense his essence, but it's different. Contained." Eldra moved slowly to examine the scorch mark, her aged face grave. The old texts speak of failed rituals consuming their practitioners, but never clearly explain the outcome. She knelt, running gnarled fingers along the edge of the blackened stone. "I believe the sacred site absorbed him, trapped his essence within the boundary stones themselves." "Can he be freed?" Thorne asked, practical even in the face of such otherworldly events. "Perhaps," Eldra replied thoughtfully, "but not easily, and not without considerable risk. For now, he is contained, neither dead nor truly alive, but suspended between states." "And Victor?" Roland questioned, looking toward the southern horizon. "If he awaits at Ravenheart, he'll know something has gone wrong when Magnus fails to return with a Silver Omega captive," Marcus stated grimly. "But he won't know exactly what happened." Thorne's expression hardened with decision. "We ride for Stormhold immediately. Victor must be confronted before he can regroup or attempt another ritual." "The Council will support you now," Roland said confidently. "Even his southern allies will withdraw support when they learn he intended to sacrifice his own son for power." As guards secured the perimeter and searched for the fled ritual practitioners, Thorne drew Sage aside, his expression complicated by the mixture of triumph and tragedy they had just witnessed. The recognition succeeded, he said quietly, golden eyes holding hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Despite everything, that truth remains. It did, Sage confirmed, still adjusting to the reality of her fully awakened wolf and the bond that now connected them beyond question. But there's still Victor to face. Thorn's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. Together, he promised. We face him together, as equals. The ride back to Stormhold was swift and purposeful, the party arriving as afternoon shadows lengthened across the castle walls. Word had already spread of their return, and the great hall filled quickly as nobles and courtiers gathered, sensing momentous events unfolding. Thorn and Sage entered side by side, their synchronized movements and the visible energy that seemed to shimmer between them, making formal announcements almost unnecessary. The recognition had succeeded. Any wolf with functioning senses could perceive the truth of their bond. Members of the council, nobles of the realm, Thorn addressed them formally. The ritual of recognition has confirmed what we believe to be true. Lady Sage Moonveil is indeed my true mate, a silver omega of the ancient Silverleaf bloodline. Murmurs swept through the gathered crowd, some congratulatory, others speculative or concerned. All eyes tracked Sage as she stood tall beside Thorn, her silver-white gown seeming to capture and reflect the fading daylight that streamed through high windows. Furthermore, Thorn continued, his voice hardening, we have uncovered evidence of treason at the highest level. Lord Victor Ravenclaw has conspired against the crown, using forbidden blood magic in an attempt to seize power. This announcement created immediate uproar. Several southern lords protested loudly, while others demanded evidence. Through the chaos, Lady Ironwolf stood, her authoritative presence quieting the chamber. "Where is Lord Ravenclaw now?" she asked directly. "At Ravenheart," Thorn replied, "performing rituals that violate our most ancient laws. His son Magnus led an attack on the recognition ceremony, confessing that his father intended to sacrifice royal blood to bind Silver Omega powers to the Ravenclaw line." "And where is Magnus?" another council member questioned. A momentary silence fell as Thorn and Sage exchanged glances. How to explain what had transpired at Sacred Valley? "Magnus Ravenclaw attempted blood magic within a sacred site," Eldra answered, her position as royal historian lending weight to her words. "The old powers responded according to their nature. He has been contained by forces beyond mortal control." This cryptic explanation created fresh murmurs, but most nobles seemed to accept it. Ancient magic was not to be trifled with, and consequences for its misuse were legendary, if not fully understood. "I propose an immediate expedition to Ravenheart," Lord Stormhaven declared. "Lord Victor must answer these charges before the full council." "Agreed," Lady Ironwolf seconded. "If these accusations prove true, the penalties must be severe and swift." The council voted overwhelmingly to dispatch forces to the Southern Territory, with only Victor's closest allies abstaining. Within the hour, Marcus departed with a contingent of royal guards, accompanied by representatives from each territory to ensure the legitimacy of Victor's arrest. As night fell, Sage stood on the balcony of the royal chambers, her chambers now, by right of recognition, if not yet formal claiming. The waxing moon hung bright in the clear sky, its light bathing the landscape in silver. "There you are." Thorn's voice came from behind her, warm and intimate in a way she was still adjusting to. "How are you feeling?" Sage turned to face him, studying the man who was now indisputably her mate. The formal attire had been replaced by simpler clothing, though nothing could diminish the natural authority he carried. "Overwhelmed," she admitted honestly, "yet strangely at peace. My wolf feels right. Like a part of myself I never knew was missing, has finally come home." Thorn moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth without actually touching. "And us?" he asked quietly. "How do you feel about what comes next?" The question hung between them, loaded with significance. Recognition had confirmed their compatibility, but claiming the formal, permanent bonding that would make her his queen in all ways remained her choice. "I know what I want," Sage replied, meeting his golden eyes directly. "I've known since before the ritual, but Victor must be dealt with first. We can't build our future with that threat still looming." Thorn nodded, respect evident in his expression. Always the healer, addressing wounds before celebrating victories. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining with natural ease. "When Victor is brought to justice, when all threats to our bond are neutralized, I will ask you properly, not as king to subject, but as mate to mate." "And I will answer," Sage promised, leaning into his solid strength. "Though I suspect you already know what that answer will be." The bond between them pulsed with shared emotion, too new to translate perfectly into words, but unmistakable in its depth and sincerity. Whatever challenges awaited, they would face them together, Alpha and Omega in perfect balance. In the royal library, Eldra studied ancient texts by lamplight, searching for precedents to understand Magnus's fate and Victor's potential strategies. In the barracks, Marcus prepared his forces for the confrontation at Ravenheart. In guest chambers, Fiona adjusted to her new role as sister to the future queen, and throughout the castle, word spread like wildfire. The king had found his true mate, a silver Omega, with powers not seen in generations. The balance of power was shifting, ancient magic returning to a world that had nearly forgotten it. For better or worse, the era of the Silver Queen had begun. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: Victor's capture, political realignments, formal announcements to the kingdom at large. But tonight, beneath the waxing moon, Sage Moonveil and Thorn Blackcrest stood together at the threshold of their shared destiny, two wolves who had found each other against all odds and all opposition. The Silver Omega and her Alpha King, stronger together than apart.